So at this time, Reginald Williams, could you lead us in prayer?
Let us pray. Oh, gracious God, our Father, it's us once again. We come to this place, Father, to take care of county business. Father, be with us as we go forward. Help us and strengthen us. Help us to be more of a community together that we can make decisions quickly in a way that we're pleasing in your sight. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. We pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Matt Walker, could you lead us into prayer at this? I pledge allegiance to the flag at this time.
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a citizen of our nation, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we would like to have approval of the minutes with a change on between line C and B. We would have Broadband Authority. I would be in that place. Other than that, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda
So
with the
moved.
changes? We have a motion by Reginald Williams. Do we have a second?
A second.
A motion by Reginald Williams, probably second by Lud Kimball. Any more roll call? Okay, if not, roll call.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield?
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye. Motion took care. At this time, we will have public comment. The rules on the public comment will be, give your name and your address, and you will be addressed all your comments to the board. There also will be signups. There are signups in the back and also up front on this podium, and you will be given 3 minutes. And I will be strict with my 3 minutes from now on. When the timer sets at 3, I'm gonna politely ask you, your time is up. So, and if you haven't signed up, you still can come up here and get that to Anne Marie, and she will call your name out because we're having a sign up now. So at this time, Anne Marie.
Okay. The first one up is going to be Rebecca Major Robbins. Oops.
I'm Rebecca Robbins. My residence is in Yorktown, Virginia. Mr. Chairman and board members, although I am not a voter of Middlesex County, I do own some property in the county, and many of my ancestors are buried across the county. The reason for my coming today is on behalf of the 118 soldiers of the Civil War that I have listed in your packet. That is not all of the soldiers that were in the war, but it's the ones that were identified in the book of cemeteries in Middlesex County, and then a few others that were ancestors of my family. It is not only Confederate soldiers, there were also some Union soldiers listed there too, and one statesman. Those that are listed, I found recorded in the book Middlesex County Cemeteries that have an inscription on their headstones or were born during the years that would have made them eligible for service between 1862 and 1865. For some of them, I had to use Ancestry.com to find their war record, and several were my ancestors, but many fought for the local 55th Regiment for the Confederate States of America, or the 24th Virginia Cavalry. There were some that fought for the Union designated by USA on your list. I think that's the first thing in your packet is that list of soldiers. Many of them deserted the Confederate States of America and joined not many of them, but some of them deserted and joined the Union. A few of the cemeteries in the book, listed in the book, only had names listed. So there was no way to know how many more may have served on either side. And of course, many of them died on the battlefield. So there's no way, and they weren't necessarily sent back to the local counties, but were buried where they fell. I have also included in your package a list of the battles that the 55th Regiment participated. And you will certainly recognize many of those names because they're in the state of Virginia. And some of the history of the men that fought in the 55th, since it was the predominant choice of serving. The information I am sharing was found on a Virginia history webpage, and the author was David Engel. But before I give a brief history of the unit, I want to share the preface from this book of cemeteries. Mr. Jesse will be very familiar with the book. He was on the Board of Supervisors when the committee put it together in 1999. The roots of numerous American families reach back to Middlesex County.
Ms. Major, I would like to thank you. I'm trying to be, I understand that we have all that information and I'd like to.
Well,
thank
you don't have the preface. And
Yeah,
there are certain things in the preface that I wanted you to hear.
Right,
as-
but we have the 3 minutes. I'm trying to be straight with the 3 minutes.
Okay,
And I appreciate that. and I thank
I'll
you.
read my last
And-
paragraph then.
Okay, you can do that. Okay.
May our endeavors honor those remembered here, mothers, fathers, too many infants and children, homemakers, farmers, watermen, craftsmen, tradesmen, soldiers, and seamen in every war. All those who have given Middlesex its special character and flavor and that lie beneath her sod. This is for all those young men that fought to preserve this soil. They were Americans like you and me, and we deserve to have a memorial. This statue is not to honor their cause, but to honor their sacrifice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready? Up
Next
next,
person,
we've
yeah.
got Steve Matthews.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Matthews. I am a lifelong Virginian and a resident of Harmony Village. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the Confederate Monument. When something happens, it is done. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose how to tell that story. In 1860, tensions rose. The future of slavery in the expanding West was at issue. Lincoln's election drove Southern states to secede from the Union. Their goal was to protect their way of life and their economy, an economy rooted in slavery. Between 1861 and 1865, throughout the South, neighbor joined neighbor and formed militias. Those men left home to fight for the Southern cause. Those men fought bravely for their cause and their comrades. In April of 1865, after Lee's surrender, those men returned home defeated but unbowed. My ancestors were among them. That is the foundational story of the lost cause. Of course, there is another story to be told. In 1861, 15 slaveholding states held nearly 4 million people in bondage. While many claim that slavery was not the war's root cause, there is no debate that slavery was a cornerstone of the Southern economy. So across the Southern states, 750,000 to 1 million men joined forces to keep nearly 4 million people in bondage. The US Constitution, Article 3, Section 3 declares that treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them. Every Confederate soldier who took up arms against the US Army was guilty of treason. That is the simple language of the Constitution. My ancestors were among them. These actions forced more than 2 million men from the North to leave their homes, join the US Army, and fight to save the Union. These US soldiers also fought bravely and well. They fought to save the Union. The abolition of slavery was a byproduct of their sacrifice. The US Army saved the Union and liberated nearly 4 million enslaved people across the South. So yes, soldiers on both sides fought bravely. They all suffered and many died, but only one side fought to preserve the Union. Only one side fought to protect chattel slavery. The monument in front of this building commemorates the traitors who fought to destroy the Union. I cannot predict the results of the referendum, but I can say this. Now is a time in our country to defeat the myth of the lost cause. It is difficult to predict when any of us will be called upon to stand up and do the right thing. But now is the time for you to demonstrate your courage and vote to remove this memorial to an unworthy cause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Lauren Wood. Our third speaker is, oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Sorry, it was a little bit of a maze. Hello, I'm Lauren Wood. I live in Urbana. I hope that you all received the book that I mailed to you, and I hope that you had the chance to read it. When I was little, attending school at Rappahannock Central Elementary School at Cook's Corner here in Middlesex County, I remember spending what seemed like the majority of our history lesson time on the Civil War in our Virginia history book. The Civil War lasted 4 years. The Confederacy, the states that left the United States of America and seceded, lasted 4 years. It is amazing to me today, looking back, how much of my elementary education was spent learning about the Civil War and primarily the Confederacy. There's so much more to learn about American and Virginia history. The more I learn as an adult, the more I learn about the whitewash of education by the Daughters of the Confederacy and other groups looking to romanticize the Confederacy and the lost cause. But we don't need a history lesson today on the disgusting acts of racist Americans in the days of slavery and Jim Crow, but we do need a heart check. And this is what it comes down to for me. As a 4th grade student at Rappahannock Central in 1989, I remember a field trip to Stratford Hall, the home place of 4 generations of the Lee family and birthplace of Robert E. Lee. I remember going to the gift shop where many of my white friends purchased Confederate war uniforms and hats and weapons. I have a clear memory of the boys running around shouting "Rebels rule" as they chased each other playing war. What must our Black friends have thought? How did they feel? This was just accepted behavior, but in 2021, it doesn't have to be. Put this Confederate monument where it belongs, in a museum or in a cemetery, not on the grounds of justice in Middlesex County, where it was meant to intimidate in the days of Jim Crow. We have an opportunity to do what is right and send a loud and clear message that American division does not belong on the grounds of justice here. Last year, I spoke with a dear classmate from elementary school. We talked about how she was the only Black child in Rappahannock Central's gifted program. She talked about a field trip to visit Monument Avenue. She cried to her mother the night before the field trip, begging her not to make her go. Nicole is 43 years old now, but she spoke of it as if it was yesterday. She remembers what it felt like when her mother forced her to go and be on her best behavior, representing her entire race in Middlesex County on that day in Richmond. Tomorrow, the Robert E. Lee Monument is being removed from Monument Avenue. To hear the pain in her voice as she recalled that, how could we, but nay, not we, you, the Middlesex County Board of Supervisors, allow this to continue when you have the power to move the monument? Last year, I helped organize an event at the historic courthouse where many Black people would attend. I was politely asked to meet on the rear grounds of the property to avoid people seeing a Confederate monument that many did not know existed in Middlesex. Shame on me. I pray that my God forgives me for that, and I regret that decision. When I meet my maker, let the Creator know that I did everything I could to do the right thing and that I endeavored to love thy neighbor every single chance I had. And certainly when I was given the power to do something good, I took action
Lauren, thank you.
for the good.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The 3 minutes is that.
Thank you. Please
Okay.
be brave and do the right thing.
Thank you.
And finally, our 4th speaker is Monica Sanders.
When I was little, one of the things that I appreciated was that my father did never put anybody above himself. And he always treated everyone just like he would treat me or anybody else. And I live with that, and I think that was very helpful. One of the things that we have to understand is we don't know what's in everybody's heart or in everybody's mind. And to me, history is history. However, one of the things that I really want to say is that the people who routinely do this in other countries is a Marxist society wants to remove history. And they're removing Columbus, and it's not just this courthouse thing. And this is a Marxist regime. I really want to serve freedom in this country. I want everybody to be free to be who they are, as long as they're not shooting somebody else, and to not hurt any other people. And I have to tell you, Wayne Jesse, I have been an admirer of yours for a very long time. And you know that because we've had conversations, but it's just been a little while since we've had a heart-to-heart talk. But I thank you when you said, "What if you don't like it, don't look at it." I was very proud of you for that, because that is the way. We can't be going around as the offended. And we have to actually work to just help other people. A neighbor with a heart attack yesterday, and I went to her aid and made sure she went to the hospital because she didn't want to go. And so there's things like that. And if you're a person like that, then you can do that. But I just want to say that I think that everybody is individual, and we have problems. It doesn't matter the color of the skin. And I know that when I go up, I'm going to see you there for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Is
That's
it?
all I have. Yes, sir.
Okay, I like to, at this, oh, we got another one.
Up
Hi.
next, we have Bridget Weinberg.
Yes, I'm 103 Hewitt Street, Saluda, Virginia. Thank you, gentlemen, for listening. I didn't plan to speak today, but a little bit back on from that last meeting. Mr. Jesse, you had mentioned, like the last speaker said, about you just don't look at it. When you come in, you don't have to look at it. And I think, how sad is it that any humans, no matter what color, what race, what background, you have to make that decision to say, I'm just not going to look at it, at this historic, beautiful historic grounds here. Everyone should be able to turn their eyes and look at this beautiful area and not have to look at their child and say, oh, just don't look at it. And instead of worrying about the majority and people saying, oh, we're erasing history, we're never going to erase that history. Never. It's here. And so I had the pleasure of having a long conversation with Mr. Williams a few weeks ago. And it had struck me when we had talked, people stood up and said, if I were a Black man and I had a Black son, but these people are not people of color with Black sons. They don't have to tell their kids, just don't look at the statue. And so when are we going to finally just do the right thing? We don't have to remove it, tear it down. My last speech, I gave strong words of hate, talking about the Daughters of Confederacy and my history, my family history of having Confederate soldiers. But we're not erasing history. We can just move the statue to an appropriate place and start to work on reconciling and work on unity and not worrying, well, like the last person said, offending people. We don't have to worry about offending the majority who think we're erasing history. We're not going to erase history. It's time to reconcile. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh, that's it? Okay, all right. Okay, you can come, yeah, come on, yeah.
Mr. Jesse, you said you wanted to learn more about history.
Give us
you
your
were-
name and your address. Yeah, so for the record.
Mike Nez, 633 Whiting Creek Road, Locust Hill. You said you wanted to learn more about history. I also was interested in history. And since the last meeting, I did some research. I did some looking. And what I found was disturbing. Undoubtedly, this monument out here is more than just banal memorial to Confederate soldiers and the women of Middlesex. In 1901, there was a convention to write a new state constitution. Andrew Jackson Montague was there at that convention. He was the Honorable A.J. Montague. He was quoted in the pamphlet as saying, the pamphlet was entitled, "No White Man to Lose His Vote in Virginia." He said, as quoted in the pamphlet, that the new constitution, quote, would effectually exclude, and this is offensive, pardon me, the idle, shiftless, and illiterate of the Negro race from the suffrage. He goes on to say that they will accomplish this without disenfranchising the white man. A.J. Montague was at the dedication of this memorial. And he said it was one of the most beautiful, and if not the most beautiful of all the state. There's a direct link, because that constitution, in that constitution, there was massive laws to disenfranchise the Black person, mainly because of poll taxes and illiteracy tests. Now, when it came to the poor white man, they didn't necessarily ask them to read the Constitution like they would ask the Black person. So it was selectively enforced because Montague and the others of the Democratic Party wanted that white vote, because after that, the Republican Party was more or less wiped out in Virginia. The Republican Party, which is the party for the Black person at that time. There was a representative from Middlesex, Robert Bristow. He was a representative at the convention for Middlesex, and he voted against the Constitution. He was the only Republican this side of the mountains that went to that convention. So we do have something to be proud of in Middlesex.
Thank you. At this time, I'm gonna close the public comment period. And next, we're gonna go on to line item 3, constitutional officer. We have the treasurer, Kathy Thrift. Like to come up at this time and
Good afternoon.
good afternoon.
Anybody got any questions over the report?
Anybody have any questions for Kathy? It's on page 50 to 54.
I would like you to know that the delinquent real estate letters, bills went out last week and our phones are ringing off the hook. So they weren't expecting those, but they got them. So we hope we'll get a response from that.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, guys, keep up the good work.
I did have one question. I'm sorry, Kathy. I had to find it on the screen. On real estate, we're a little off pace in percent collected. Is that just because we're not quite at a point in the year where we can evaluate 2021 versus previous years?
Yes.
And is that in the next couple months that we would
I
be
hope it'll
comparing
straighten
apples
it,
to
yes.
apples?
Mhm,
Perfect. Thanks, Kathy.
mhm.
Well, thank you. Next, we will have Commissioner Revenue, May. I think May is gonna be on the phone. She not? She's not here? Oh, okay. Well, that'll be on page 55. Next, we have line item C, Sheriff David Bushy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I come to you today about a budget supplement request. As you know, the General Assembly went back into session in August of this year. And they passed a request for COVID relief for law enforcement, the LEOs. That's the full-time law enforcement officers. And that is going to be a $3,000 one-time fee, not fee, it's going to be a bonus paid in December of this year. What we're requesting is, we did it at the jail the other day. They did their whole staff down there for the $3,000. We're requesting that we have 11 comp board positions, which the state funds, and then we have 17 total. So 6 positions you all fund, and we would ask if you could fund the $3,000 for those 6 positions.
All right. Do anybody have any question for Sheriff Bushy?
Do you know when in December those monies would be dispersed? Is it early December prior to the holidays?
I don't know. They haven't given it to us yet.
Okay, just curious.
A lot of the counties at the jail board, they're all doing that, and some of them are doing the whole office and that. So we're just trying to get to kind of the battles in there with the sheriff's office, is trying to get all the full timers same as the rest of the LEOs.
Does anyone else have any question for Sheriff Bushy?
I got one question. How about the temps, the extra ones? Are they getting anything?
No. We're a small office, and some of the offices are doing that. They're doing it because the offices are small, and the office staff, the dispatchers, and the part-timers all have been exposed to the COVID. We had 3 people come down with COVID during this so far. I know I was quarantined twice. Quite a few of us have been quarantined because we're in direct contact with folks all the time. We just have to deal with it. It's like the mask rule. We have to take our masks off when we give orders to the citizens, which exposes us. So other counties are doing that. Yes, some are doing that.
All right. Any other board members have any questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve appropriation request form FY 2022-13?
So moved.
Have a motion by John. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion by John, properly second by Mansfield. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Mansfield. Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Jesse.
Aye.
Excuse, Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Motion so carried. All right. The floor is
Thank you
open
very
to
much.
again.
All right. The second thing I'm here for is we've been talking about body cameras, and that's coming along with all the police reform that's going across the nation. And we're also talking about accreditation over at the sheriff's office. Currently, out of all the sheriff's offices, there's 120, I think 24 sheriff's offices across the Commonwealth. And it looks like 22 of us are not with cameras right now. We expect that they're going to actually have a law that's going to require us. The reason that we haven't done this is it's because some of it's the cost. The cost is not just for the cameras and the storage, it's for implementing everything that goes along with it. For example, we have no records keepers in our office. We don't even have a records room. We are tapped out of space. So we couldn't even get going on that until we had that issue resolved. And the accreditation is also another topic that is going in police reform. And it looks like that could be something that could be coming up here shortly that would mandate all the localities to have accreditation. Saying that is brought us to the attention that our building, the building up at the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office, actually that building right there, it was constructed in 1986 and it was designed for a staff of 8 deputies and 4 of 911 communication people in there. The building has small offices and a main hallway that funnels all foot traffic through the centralized portion of congestion. Understandably, 1,200 square foot office space as laid out was designed to meet the immediate needs for that era, and no consideration was given for future growth or expansion. You go to the next slide, Kevin. We'll have the parking. Yeah, it's the one with the cars down underneath. There you go. Along with this building, when I came in, we added that parking lot there. And as you can see, it's packed. Out front, we paved the front of that. There's parking for my car, one handicapped person, one visitor, and that patrol car there is when they bring inmates in. To show you that it's very dangerous when you have civilians walking around, you could have a person that's been arrested, kicking, fighting, and they have to wrestle them into the door there. So it's pretty much outdated. One visitor parking, we have visitors all the time, and the visitors and the rest of the people park across the street over where Archie Sochek's at. So sometimes we fill up their lot. So we need more room for handicap and for visitors. The original dispatch room right there is now the magistrate's office. The problem when we brought the magistrate in, now that we have one sitting there, is if you look at that bottom photo, the hallway's right there. We have a problem with this because right across the hall is the detectives, and if they're interviewing or talking with people, they hear everything that's going on. The magistrate's office, magistrate hears everything that's going on, and there's their office, which there's no privacy. There's also another problem with this building that when we do have a juvenile arrest, for those of you that do not know, if we bring a juvenile into our building and there's civilians around, we have to close all the doors. Civilians are not allowed to see who we're arresting. We have to protect those juveniles and their rights. So therefore, when we bring a juvenile in, if we have an adult arrested, we've got to close all of our doors in our building. And the building's so small, we're not able to protect all the time. We don't have a holding room. As you see that bench down there, that's what we have. So if we have someone, we've had people in there that we brought in that were either under the influence of alcohol or drugs, they've actually kicked from that bench, which is shackled and chained to that wall. They've kicked the magistrate's desk over. They've kicked all the computers over and destroyed it, which the state pays for that. That's because it's a state office in there, which is very dangerous because the magistrate's now cornered in the back and can't get out. Has to, if there's nobody in there, it takes a while for us to get to her because sometimes she's holding people in there without law enforcement there when civilians walk in. So that kind of shows that that's outdated. The deputies bay, that's a 12 by 12 room designed for 6 deputies, has now 15 deputies in it. We have 2 computers, a refrigerator, 3 file cabinets, and temporary evidence lockers. So just so you know that when we bring evidence in, we have to lock it up because it has to be secure before it goes into our main room. They have to lock it into there. The little refrigerators in there is for perk kits. That's for sexual assaults. So everything's piled up in there. It's takes up most of the room. That after about 3 deputies, it gets a little crowded in there. The detective's office, there's 3 detectives in there and 1 civil process, some equipment and a closet. There's no room for our undercover officer. He comes in, has to, borrow a room every time he comes in. And plus the confidentiality with him, sometimes he can't even use this office because if somebody's in seeing the magistrate, it might be somebody he's looking after, out after. As you can imagine, detectives are always on the phone. They're talking to the victims in their cases, and they're overhearing each other. There's no separation. It's unfair to the victims to hear what's going on with another victim, but there's nothing that we can do about that right now. I mean, it's just the way we operate. The lobby, that's the entrance coming in that lobby. In there, there's a room for about 2 to 3 people to sit and wait, whether they're seeing the magistrate, whether they're seeing detectives, or whether they're seeing Dina, or they're being fingerprinted for some of the other agencies. That's the way they come in the building, and that's what they see. They pick up a phone and they talk right to the dispatch, who decides which direction they go. You also have your prescription drug box there, which, we have to monitor that because some people want to take that away with them. Some people drop off their drugs. Some people want to take our drugs. All right, next one is the evidence property room, which is our armory. This is so outdated, it doesn't qualify for a lot of things to be accredited. Inside the first picture there in the middle, that's where the evidence is placed if it's general evidence, and it's placed in those bins. The door behind it goes into a room where we keep all the guns, all the drugs, and all the perk kits once they get back from the state lab. Everything stays in there. We had to purchase a safe in there because as you know, we have unclaimed bodies and they're inside that safe, along with our AR-15s and our M4 and our equipment that we would take out when we need it. So that is a problem for us to get accredited also. The design of that's just outgrown. Bulk evidence storage is outside, which used to be I think the Verizon had that building. And when they vacated it, we asked if we could have it. Problem with accreditation on that, everything has to be fenced in. There's no lighting, there's no heat or air. So everything that we put in there, if it has to be room temperatured, it has to go somewhere else. We just don't have anything there. There's no security camera on that, which is, we've got cameras on the fenced in area, but not on that area. And we can't get down there on that hill to get down below there to get to it, to put stuff in it. So it's kind of a useless building. On accreditation, our generators, because we're a secured facility, it requires that all the fencing should be around all these units. We have no fencing around all that. And they have to be lit with cameras on. We have no storage, like I said, and no record room. So we have, just like you, we have a bunch of stuff down the basement of the courthouse. And this is the bottom of the staircase in our building, which stacks up, and we have to keep the records. And it keeps piling up, piling up. And I believe our attic still might have some stuff up there. I don't know if we got it cleaned up. I don't know if Kevin can get it around there. That's not secured. It's not designed as a records room. There's no records manager. To get accreditation, we have to have a records manager and a record clerk. So we're out of space, basically. The solution is, for us, we've been looking at it. I've been talking with each of you. I know Mr. Williams has a project. If it doesn't go through, I would like to be the next on the list to look at this project, is the Puller Center up there in Cook's Corner. We went up there, we've looked at it, and if that project doesn't go through, we would like to be considered to move to that location. The reason being is the current plan, the layout, as you can see, in the back section there, it's all dining and classrooms. In the front section on the right is all the offices for administration, and on the left was some smaller classrooms and offices. We looked into that building. We know how we can make it work. To get accreditation, if the government says that we have to do this, they're probably going to give you a year or two. That means you're going to probably have to build a building from scratch. Or ideally, if we can get this, it would save the taxpayers a lot of money. I think the last sheriff's office that was built in the region was $5 to $7 million. I think we can get into this building if it's cleaned up. It's going to need a generator, some fencing in that. But this could be something that we could grow into. The next floor plan is what we kind of looked at, or proposed what we could do to that building. And if you look up in the front on the right, we broke those rooms up that would show where the secretary, myself, my chief deputy, lieutenant, and the records people would all be. In the backs, there'd be in the backside where those other conference rooms were, there would be a conference room, 911 operations, a classroom, which is an EOC, and a dining meeting room would also serve as a classroom and with the EOC. We would leave the kitchen and laundry there. The laundry, actually, we thought about it, is good because there's many times you guys don't know, we get into a lot of fights and we come back bloody. And we come back sometimes with massive different things on us, and we tend to go home. And it would be nice that we just could go in there and wash our stuff and not bring it to our house. So actually that laundry room, I think we'd want to keep it there because we could utilize it. Coming in, there's a garage door in the back. We'd want to move it to the side and put 2 holding cells. And the reason for that is to keep, if we have a juvenile in the deputy's bay, we got them secure where we don't have to interfere with each other. The front walls up on the left side, in the front, would be all your detectives and a magistrate and the interview room. So we know we can make the building work. It's going to take some money to do that. We've been bumped around for quite a while on capital improvements. And that's just to give you an idea of what we're thinking. And we wanted to bring that to your attention so that you could consider that if Mr. Williams' project does not go through. And I don't know if there's any questions about
Okay. Any
accreditation. or
questions
anything.
for Sheriff Bushy on this building? To let people know that the building is vacant, it was rented out to Community Service Board and who else? And Bay Aging.
Aging, yeah.
And right now it's vacant. And when Sheriff Bushy found out about that and Reggie was looking at a school that wanted to get there, and I think it will work right in good at this time when it's, by it being vacant now. So,
Yeah, and if it doesn't go through, we'd like to ask you then to put a team together to go forward with it. And we'd like to have some folks from the county asked if they could actually help us with it. I know if we did go through, we'd like to bring the EOC up there. So we'd like David Lehman on that. I need Kevin. Everybody needs Kevin, but I would need Kevin to look at the security and the IT section of that. And then I think Ms. Riccardi said she'd be interested in serving on that. So if we do go forward with that, I would ask if those three could go along with my team, and if you want to do that.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Put your mic on.
We built this beautiful building across the street from us, where all the trials are held and that sort of thing.
Right.
Is there absolutely no space in that for your records and for?
No, actually, you guys, and I've told Wayne this, when Judge Long was here and he was our circuit court judge, he said in about 6 years, there would probably be building in the basement for the JDR court, because that building was designed for 3 courtrooms. And so what happened was 6 years have come across and they moved the judicial lines. Now they brought in a new JDR judge. And with all the new rules that are going along with JDR rules and the general district court, she has moved into the hearing room, which is a very small room. And so I suspect that in the near future, the county is going to be told to build a JDR, because we added how many, 2 extra days, 3 extra days a month, because JDR court is expanding. So in the future, that whole thing, we're going to have to move everything that I have down there, because all my uniforms are down there and all my records are down there and all your records are down there. And we're going to have to find a place to move all that. When the judge orders that, as you are aware of, it's an order and it has to be built. So I would say that's coming in the near future. So we've exhausted. I have equipment right now that I have for the festival and other operations that we have that is scattered throughout this county. I have equipment in Deltaville. I have equipment up at the north end of Jamaica. I have equipment laying in that courthouse, all up in the parking lot. I don't even have room for my equipment. It's coming to the point where we've got our money's worth out of the sheriff's office. You got your money's worth, but we're going to be pushed into this with all this police reform that's coming up. I don't know how much it's going to cost us, but it looks like they're pushing it all down on the localities. This Marcus law that just came out, it's going to cost you dearly for the mental health right now. It could cost you up to, with the police security on that, up to 5 days, $1,000 a day, $1,000 a day for a deputy to stay with that person until they're released, because they're shutting all the state hospitals down.
Your building right now is 1,200 square feet.
Yes, and we have 43 people on staff.
And
Besides-
how much more area do you feel that you need?
Well, you guys are bringing water and sewer here, so we're going to grow. We're going to grow fast, and you're going to have to think about. The reason I'm looking at this building is I'm looking at the future, because sometimes we forget to do that around here. And I think that if the building's available, if it comes available, that would be something that we could grow into. That building, if it's done and restored back and is sound, you're probably looking at a life expectancy of 35 years. And you're probably a growth up to 100 deputies, because if you get water and sewer and things start coming here, hotels and that, you're going to be at 100 deputies in a short time. Gloucester grew fast. And so you've got another campground that's coming. We can't, right now, our deputies on the weekends with these campgrounds, where do you think they're at? They're not on the roads patrolling, they're in the campgrounds. You're funding deputies in the campgrounds right now in the summer, because they're always in those campgrounds. So as you grow and as you keep growing, you're gonna have to think about the sheriff's office. We just saw the building. Mr. Jesse called me up, was it last week, week before last, and said to call Mr. Williams, and we all met over there. And Mr. Williams, he's just waiting for the answer on this. But I think this building, if it becomes available, we need to grab it. I don't want taxpayers paying $5 to $7 million for a new sheriff's office because of what the state and the federal government's doing to police reform. Because they're going to push it
How
on.
large building is that?
That building is 49, I think it's 4,900, 4,800 square feet. And just on that last layout, we would like to move the ELC there because that would help you all out, because I already know your ELC. If we had a hurricane or a tornado here, everybody would be out in the streets out here. Because when I went up to Tappahannock, theirs was so small. There was probably, we utilized all around the courthouse, shut all the roads off, went over to, what is that place, that burger place over there called? Northern Neck Burger, that was full. We used all those parking lots and had to shut everything down because the EOC was too small. Because when you start mobilizing for after a hurricane, you're having the federal government's going to come here. That's why the judge didn't want you to put an EOC in the basement of that courthouse. Because after 9/11, what happened at the Pentagon was the sheriff in Arlington County, they had the EOC in her courthouse. And when the government came in, they shut the courthouse down completely. That backlogged all of the courts. So that was one of the reasons why the judge didn't want you to put an EOC there. The EOC would be incorporated in. I think we just have to wait and see what happens to Mr. Williams' project. But I'm more concerned about not coming back up here and asking for a new building. Because if the government says we have to do that, and we're already packed in like sardines right now.
What about the convenience of you being next to the courthouse and next to the jail?
I talked with the judge about that. That's only 2 miles down the road. And as you know, we move fast. And if we move too far, I think Mr. Coons had a discussion with us about that, about moving maybe to a building further down the county. And the problem a judge would have there, the further we are away from the courthouse, he can order you to have more deputies at full time in that courthouse to secure it. He said, how long could you get before you get here, Sheriff? 2 minutes and under. So he would not require any more deputies. You already have 2 to 3 deputies in there at all time. And if they can't hold the fort down until we get there in 2 or 3 minutes, the judge isn't worried about that. He would not, that doesn't impose any problems to him.
Thanks.
Well,
Any other questions?
yeah, any more questions? I think it'd be a good idea to get a committee together. And Reggie, I don't know if that's in your district. Would you be interested in being on that committee if we get one together? If you see things that go on?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, what we'll do, we'll get a committee together and then we'll see if the school doesn't plan out, we'll get a committee together along with Anne Marie, yourself, and who y'all said, and definitely Kevin and whoever else on that committee, but we'll put that committee.
Yeah, David Lehman would be good if we
David
do,
Lehman,
if we do the
definitely
EOC
David
down there. I
Lehman.
need
Right.
David around.
Okay.
And that's it. Thank you. Anything else?
We need a motion on that.
And Sheriff Bushy, I should know.
Okay.
I should know somebody. The day is the 7th, so I should know something about that.
So do you want me to come back then next month? or-
I'll call, let you know.
Yeah, just let me know and I'll come back up and then we'll put the
get a
committee together
Okay, by the time.
if that happens.
Right.
Okay,
You got it. All right. Well, thank you.
thank you all.
All right. Next, line item 4, agency and staff report. We have VDOT report only, but I saw Ron here. I don't know if he was ready there. Come on up, Ron. I don't know if anybody had any question for you at this time, but I'm gonna have you up here. Because they had report
Thank
on
you,
it,
Mr.
but I
Chairman.
saw you here, so.
I really wasn't prepared for a regular report,
Uh-huh.
but certainly, well, the first thing I'd like to do is also introduce you to a gentleman that's come down from the Fredericksburg District to give us a hand down here for a little while, Mr. Andrew Thorpe. Andrew's been, he's a engineer in training from the district. He's been a lot of help to me with Joyce being gone. And he's been here about almost a month now. And I think he's got a couple more weeks before the full-time RA that's been selected will be here, I believe, next week. And that has been announced. A gentleman by the name of Lee McKnight will be the RA starting next week. Anyway, if you have any questions from the report, I'd be happy to try to address them.
Does anybody have any road issues?
Yeah, just one, Ron, and I know we're catching you off guard and you're here for the under review Mill Creek Landing primarily, but I noticed under supervisor request, you have completed site distance and vegetation trimming on Route 624 Syringa Road at Tall Chief. You may recall Citizen Greg Gritzmeyer came a couple months ago and made a pretty compelling presentation about speed. And we had a friend that was hurt pulling out of there. Do you feel when you trimmed that area, did it get beyond where it should have been, or was it just right within normal maintenance? And by the time we got to it, it was appropriately managed?
I will say that we were able to trim the limits of our right of way. Whether it's ideal or not, probably could be a lot better. But within the limits of our maintenance responsibilities, our jurisdiction, we were able to trim that back significantly. Greg also had requested a speed study for the whole section. And so we're working on that. They want to take advantage of the latest traffic count, which has been performed within about the last 30 days. So it's awful handy when you're looking at a stretch of road to have the latest traffic counts.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one thing to say, also, I remember, when you came here and you said you was taking George's place. And I mentioned,
Temporary.
and I mentioned to you about the same area down, and I was glad to see that you all got it done. I mean, it's not perfect, but I really appreciate. I felt that you went off, what you had to do, your planning, whatever this in there for you all to do. Hey, man, I appreciate it because some that came to me would, say, hey, Reggie, I appreciate that they got down. I said, me too. And I was going to tell you that tonight. Now you got a young man coming along right here. You the one coming up?
Yes, sir.
With Halers Road. And
I know the new RA. He's helping.
correct. That's all. I can put it out there in the office so we know.
The new one's
I got that. He's a young man. Look, Locust Hill, Halers Road, Route 33, by the 7-Eleven. Now I'm gonna give you something hard to do. The residents want a stoplight. But somebody might get hurt there, and I don't think we solved the problem yet. Years ago, when they put it in, they made the turnoff too close. You know how, getting easements, stuff like that. So they pull it closer to the center of the road. Therefore, you got people coming across the road and they're taking chances to get in there, and accidents have happened there. And, they mentioned to me, also that, so I mentioned to you, because you just come on, and the other thing, down there by the schools where you make a left turn coming from Deltaville, we have a light down there by Harmon Grove Church that will allow you to make your turn on caution. Also got that mentioned, could you do the same type of thing, to go in caution, somebody can make the turn. Instead of, you can't turn to it.
The one at the school?
The one at the school that you make your left turn.
Flashing
Yeah,
yellow arrow.
yeah.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Appreciate it once again, really appreciate it.
Anyone else? If not, we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Next, school matter. Dr. Tracy Sykes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So today I am here. We have 4 appropriation requests that are in your packet. They start on page 60. And I will go through them and then answer any questions if you have questions on those. So the first one is carryover for our federal title funds and IDEA, which is special education. And that's a carryover from fiscal 21 to fiscal 22. The next 3 are all grants, CARES grants, we refer to them. And last month when I was here, I just did an overview of what we were using the funding for each of those for. But the first one is the ESSER 2 grant. You can see what that amount is, and that amount is what was dedicated to us. The next one is actually, it's still an ESSER 2, but it was a set-aside grant, and we applied for that specific amount from Middlesex County Public Schools that we used for unfinished learning. And then the third, which is the last one, is the ESSER 3 grant funds, which we just submitted the application for that. So any questions on those?
Any board member have any questions? I'll give them time. So at this time, do we have a motion to approve the appropriation request form FY 2022-09, 10, 11, and 12?
So moved.
I have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by John, probably second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield, and Mr. Jesse.
Aye. Motion so carried.
All right.
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question.
I figured
You
that.
know that.
I just don't know what it
How's
is.
this Delta virus going on in the school system?
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just curious, because we know the numbers
Sure.
are picking up and things like that. And
Sure.
I'm just, because I hear things and I
Right.
just want to know.
So I've moved from, and you probably know when we first started, I went to whenever we got our first announcement of our first positive case, which I think was the first Thursday we were open, was a letter to notify. And then when that started happening, about every day, I got some feedback and started to do that on Fridays, where I send a letter home to the parents on, this is the number of positive cases, this is the number of students who are required to quarantine. We don't identify the schools or location, because remember, sometimes we forget about Compass Academy or the school board office, where we have less than 10 people in those spaces. And so we don't identify where the space is or which bus it was on. And so that does stay general. What we've tried to do is really focus on our mitigation strategies. I was on a call last week with Dr. Lane with the Department of Education and with the Department of Health. And what the director of the Department of Health said, we're not expecting no cases, we're expecting mitigation strategies. And so we've gone, when we first started the year, our classrooms to the greatest extent possible, we've got our kids 3 feet apart. Masking, anyone in the building is masked, whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, and that follows the CDC guidelines. So anytime we get below 3 feet is when we have to identify a close contact, even if we've got a masking situation. That requires quarantining anywhere from 7 to 14 days, depending on which algorithm we use there. Adults have to be 6 feet apart at all times, and that requires a quarantine. So where we were seeing that hit us was in the cafeteria, where we were not able to have that 6 feet of distancing, because your mask obviously has to come down when you eat lunch. And so we've gone back, and we were trying to keep kids out of the classrooms while they were eating, but that's what we've gone back to. So we've moved to 6 feet of distance in the cafeterias, spaced out 6 feet of distance in the classrooms. We worked with Laser Clean, which is our custodial company that we use to make sure we can get cleaned up after that. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for us to see the effects of that, going down from maybe 9 students having to quarantine down to 1 or 2 maybe, because we're still seeing, we just came back today after 4 days off, but we were still getting calls last night of a student that may have been diagnosed yesterday, but had symptoms on Wednesday. And so whenever we've got a case where we've got symptoms, we have to backtrack 2 days in order to do our contact tracing. And so I know it can be a little bit frustrating to get a call on a Monday night that your child was in contact maybe with someone on Wednesday of last week, but it just may be when the test has come back positive for a student. So our administrators are working literally day and night to keep all of those things in place, and we adjust where we see the adjustments are needed. But like I said, we should see that the number of students quarantining should be coming down as we're able to distance even more. But it's definitely here. I would say we're definitely seeing, we had a meeting today with principals. We are seeing more cases than we saw in the spring when we were open then. And of course, we all know things got better in the summertime and then picked back up. The call I was on last week with the health department, they did say they're starting to see a slight decrease, or at least a flattening a little bit. So my understanding is maybe in the next month, hopefully, we could see a decrease there, but we focus on those mitigation strategies. We try to share with parents that everything these days, even though you think it may be allergies or a cold or strep, it is definitely symptoms of COVID. And we encourage families to see their medical professional for that, because things maybe 2 years ago that you could send your child to school and they would feel okay and get through the day. We're seeing that those definitely are symptoms of COVID now. So anything that's not normal, stay home.
Other board members have any questions for Stacey? If not, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have the Broadband Authority update, John Coons and Kevin Gentry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have some exciting opportunities as a community in terms of broadband. I've been on the Broadband Authority for a little over 3 years. Admittedly, did not know what all we needed, what all was available 3 years ago, but we as an authority have learned a lot. Last year, the 2020 grant, we were able to put together a $766,000 project that will, when construction is complete, add 140 new homes or businesses with broadband internet. The exciting news is we are getting ready to apply for another grant with VATI this year. That's state money. And we've partnered with the private entities Dominion and All Points Broadband. And if we go forward and get VATI funding from the state and contribute ARPA money that we've already allocated for this project and the additional county money that I'm going to be asking for today, this will essentially end the Broadband Authority. In other words, we will serve the last 1,000 people who do not have broadband access in our county. So there still will be a mission for the Broadband Authority, I think, because we will still have the problem of people with particularly long driveways having high capital costs that may be unachievable for some demographics. And so we'll probably still operate Middlesex SERFs or something similar to that, that would extend low interest financing for those capital projects to make sure that we're not just getting internet to their mailbox, but getting their internet all the way to their house. So with that said, there are a couple trend lines in place other than us accelerating the deployment of broadband all the way to the completion mark of 100% everybody served in the community. One thing that we're noticing is that interest rates are at historic lows, and there's no guarantee on what those look like going forward. Another thing that we've noticed is that we have ARPA money, and we don't anticipate having that kind of manna from heaven every year. But the ARPA committee within our team as a county has allocated 750 or 800,000, somewhere on that order, that could go to this project. And again, this would be the last broadband project theoretically. But the other one that is a bit alarming is last year's grant, even though it was a much smaller number of passes that we got installed at 140 new customers, VATI contributed 58% of that 766,000. In this year's grant, it is more competitive. There is more money coming from both the federal and state governments as focus is shifted to infrastructure. But this year, competitive grant applications are going to be at a minimum asking for 20% VATI participation. So we've gone from 58% of the project covered with Virginia grants to be even considered, we need at least 28%. So it's a significant drop in how much we can expect from the state. So all this to say, the decision in front of us is how much do we want to fund, and the number that we would need to essentially guarantee as much as you can guarantee that we'll win the grant is 20% of the $10.5 million project. So we would be paying $1.15 million to guarantee that we will, or as close as you can come to guarantee that we will get Virginia grant money to match ARPA money, to match the private sector money, which is 62% of the project, or $6.5 million. That will be coming from the private sector, from Dominion, All Points Broadband. So we've got all these other entities in place. We have the good fortune, if you dare call it, of having ARPA money that we normally wouldn't have. And we have historic low interest rates. And moreover, if you read our capital improvement plan, this body has been supportive of approaching, if not getting to 100% coverage in our small community in Middlesex County. So the opportunity is here. The question, my fellow board members, is how risky do we want to get? Do we want to put a little in and risk that we don't get the grant, which will kill the project for at least another year? And then we're going to be in an environment next year where we don't know how much funding is available. We don't know what interest rates are. We don't know what ARPA money would be available, if any. Or do we want to be aggressive and go all the way up to asking Virginia for only 20% of the project cost, which would be us putting out 1.15 million. So the aggressive case where we absolutely have almost 100% chance of getting this, the county would contribute 1.15. The place I would most stay away from is the least aggressive, where we're only putting in 300,000, but we're probably flipping a coin as to whether we get the project. And then we're at the mercy of interest rates, no ARPA funding, less Virginia support next year. And the engineering costs, if the last 2 years our guide with water, sewer, and now broadband, these projects are not getting cheaper as well. So with all that in mind, my recommendation, and I apologize that I can't make it on behalf of the Broadband Authority, because we're not able to put together a public meeting in time to give you a Broadband Authority recommendation. But I can say I've spoken with many of our Broadband Authority. We've been working on this project in theory for multiple years, as this isn't our first VATI application, but specifically with Atlantic Point, or good Lord, All Points Broadband and Dominion. We've been working with them since we entered an MOU in April to pursue this. So the question before you is, do we want to be aggressive and put $1.15 million into this and almost guarantee that we'll be done with the broadband question? Or do we want to be risky and only put 300,000 in and risk that we're going back at this? My recommendation is that we put in 800,000. It splits the baby a little bit, but given what we've studied in this market, we think our chances are probably above 90% that we then get the VATI funding and the project goes through. So this is basically a request for a commitment of 800,000 to the Broadband Authority. And we are putting in our application, September 14th is our deadline. So we need to make a decision on how aggressive we're going to be today to preserve this opportunity. And I do apologize that I don't have my Broadband Authority standing behind me per se, but we literally got the numbers in Thursday. And I'm open to any questions or comments, concerns, thoughts, et cetera.
Yeah, that's understandable, John. But I can say that, definitely the northern end of the county, we look like we're the stepchild. We always get the last thing, and we definitely need internet up in the county. We definitely need it, and I'm all in favor, for the $800,000.
And that reminded me, Mr. Jesse, this new company it's new to us in this area, but the theoretical starting fee for a new customer is $199 in capital to set up the account. And with that comes the first 500 feet. So if your driveway is under 500 feet, you can get internet. If it's over 500 feet, you can still get it, but you're going to have an additional fee that's based on the linear footage. Right now, when you go to the existing provider, you're either looking at a wireless option where we're not looking at putting in additional wire, or you're looking at covering a certain amount of linear feet from what I call the mailbox to the house. And that quote can be different one house to the next, not just based on, if you have the same 1,000-foot driveway, you could get a different quote from the current provider because they're having to actually build out the entire plant to your home in some instances. And so they have to go back and they have to do more work on their existing infrastructure. It's not just as simple as running that line to that house. So you can get some really exorbitant numbers with All Points Broadband and Dominion. They have the advantage of designing this whole system from scratch. And so they can work in those costs such that they're building so that they already have the plant built to accommodate whoever they've passed that might want to come and join their service. So that really helps, because this would be tragic if we spend this kind of money and we run internet past all these mailboxes and people say we still can't hook up. So we've mitigated that to the extent possible by designing a system that has factored in at least the first 500 feet. Any other questions?
Can you clarify? It's confusing to me. I'm sure it's confusing to others. The use of ARPA money, and just for clarity here, ARPA is funding for COVID relief that has been granted to the county, distributed by the state. It was about $1.6, $1.7 million that's still available in total. And so the allocation of that money is to help recover from the COVID type environment and the issues that we faced. And so obviously broadband reared its head as a major issue in COVID. And so we believe that the proper allocation of the ARPA funds takes broadband into account. And so I think $750,000 or $800,000 has been earmarked to help the broadband situation. So John, could you just put into context, you just said, I'm going to ask for $800,000. Now, is some of that ARPA? Is that all county? That's what's confusing.
Yeah, and I can see how that's confusing. We're actually asking for the $750,000 or $800,000 that we have allocated out of ARPA, and then an additional $800,000 that we have to come up with that is not necessarily fully accounted for in the capital improvement plan. And so the way we would come up with that, and maybe Matt Walker can speak to this a little better than I, we would pursue a loan at current interest rates, given our credit, and we wouldn't have to start paying it back in full quickly. In other words, the actual outflow of cash is not going to be all 10.5 million project wide right at the gate. There will be spending in tranches during the process of construction over the next 2 years. So in talking with Matt, we can take some of this out of fund balance without damaging ourselves. And that'll be a consideration for another day as to how much we take from fund balance and how much we finance in the marketplace.
And I thought you had said 1.15 million would guarantee our match. And so 800 or 750 from ARPA and 800 from the county is a lot more than that. So help me understand that.
So the options that I'm basically trying to present, and the reason I'm not giving you a PowerPoint per se, is this is a very competitive grant, and this is a public meeting, and there are other counties who we're competing with that if they learn exactly how much we're putting into it, that could be intelligence for them. So I'll be as clear as I can, but I wanted to be clear on why it seems like I'm not being transparent. So there are two goalposts. If we contribute 800 in all considerations, in my pro forma, I've put 800,000 in from ARPA. So all three of these scenarios, it's above ARPA spending is what I'm asking. To guarantee that we get the loan or get the grant and the project moves forward, or as close to guarantee as I can, It's the 800,000 in ARPA plus an additional 1.15 million. There's a strong argument to be made. And if I was in Wayne's district where the bulk of this issue is manifest, I'd probably be in support of the full 1.15. I mean, if we can guarantee this, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to come back with a better offer, even with the 1.15 million. On the other extreme, again, we're taking 800,000 from ARPA. We're putting in a much smaller 300,000 on top of ARPA. And now it's a coin flip as to whether we get the grant funding and whether the project moves forward. Somewhere in the middle, anywhere between 300,000 and 1.15 million are our options. My recommendation, with my understanding of this market, and it's a bit dangerous for me to say, my life gets a lot easier if you guys all just agree to 1.15 million and we can say we gave it our absolute best shot. I think we have a little bit of room to play chicken with this. And I think at 800,000 on top of the 800,000 from ARPA, that's us being as fiscally prudent as we can without risking that we're going to be with a broadband problem for another 5 years.
Question. Basically, us giving, the county giving 2 million, and the state gonna get 2 million. Then it's 6, a total of 10 altogether.
It depends on what we decide.
So what we're gambling on is the 2 million that we're gonna get from the state. The state could give us more or less.
The more we give, the less the state gives.
Right.
And if the state gives less, we have a better shot of winning.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Does that make
understand
sense?
it, right? Yeah, it makes sense. I just want to make sure everybody else understood that. Also, at the same time, I feel just like this year, and I'm gonna say it like this year, Warsaw been beating us all day. Warsaw got a better deal than what we're being offered. They're being offered more money. I mean, coming from the state, we're gonna have to check out representation at higher levels, simply because that's who really puts in for you. That's who fight for you. Mill Six have been offered opportunities, like I was talking about the schools, for instance, and that. Well, guess what? It's a good possibility of Warsaw might end up with the school. So in anything that we say, we got to be smart at what we do. We know we need broadband. I mean, this is not a question. We've been needed. We overlook areas in the county. And this is something we need, and it costs money. We know people that is working at home, times that change is going to continue. It's going to continue to change. And, you know, it's time for us to take some risks. Because if you look back on our history of risk, we don't do nothing. We don't take too many risks. We stay on a safe thing all the time. We are safe. We don't get it. What we do to schools, we put one roof on the school and turn around and put it on again. Instead of building another school, we take an add on all the way around the school. So it's, and I look at it, you know, it's like this year. Basically, our chances of getting 2 million from the state is basically us putting up 2 million. Where we get the 2 million from, we got 800,000. Then we need another 1.2 million. Simple math. How you gonna do it? We're gonna have to pay it back. You know, and I'm just seeing things like this is gonna cost us something, but we still gotta be smart at what we do. If we can be smart at what we do, we don't have to be like other places that keep on getting your tax rate out of sight. We gotta choose what we need and be smart at what we got. This is an opportunity. I feel that, you know, maybe we got the ticket. And then we also leave the same thing and ask everybody that got big budgets, really to be accountable and fine tune your budget. So when we ask for a report that we can see exactly what's going on, then it makes it easier for the taxpayer to look at it. I use the saying a 7th grader, well, I changed my mind. I'm talking about a 5th grader. A 5th grader, addition, subtraction, and division. You gotta make it see like this here. And the reason I'm saying this in Warsaw, because I went to the one in Warsaw, Virginia Power, so it makes me almost smile just think about how powerful they are. They're in on this. And once again, we're gonna be paying them, and they basically ain't gonna have to put up no money. And we still gonna be paying them, and I'm saying that indirectly, because that's how it's done. They're gonna get credit from the federal government on this stuff, and they, you know, putting it in the ground, and we need it, so we gotta get it. So and we just gotta be smart at what we do. So John, I mean, I talked to Kevin and John, and you know, I ain't for taking a whole lot of risks. I want it because if somebody find out what we're doing, we're gonna get undermined because somebody got better representation at the top than what we had. And that's where I feel about it, because I almost, from an incident that happened, I almost know it. So we gotta make sure that our representation, when these kind of things come out, it's no buddy thing because I like you. that you got to represent us as people of Middlesex County so we can get the things that we need.
And I'll just comment, Reggie, I don't like losing at anything. I like to be first, but sometimes second is even better. So we're doing the same thing that Warsaw and what they've done up on the Northern Neck, but we're the second iteration. Now, had I been first, I'd be giving you a different speech. We are second. The VATI funding is coming down every year in theory. So, you know, we need to strike while the iron's hot. And then one other point of clarification, we are talking about, depending on what we decide, 2 to 3 million coming from the state. But remember, out of the 10.5 million, 6.5 million is coming from private sector. So of a $10.5 million project, we found 800,000 in federal money. We found 2 to 3 million in Virginia money, 6.5 from the private sector. I can't do any better than this. And it just really comes down to, do we want to make sure we win this? Do we want to just take a shot at it? Or do we want to go somewhere in the middle of the road?
I'd like to hear from other board members.
Somewhat dumb question, I'm afraid. Where does Atlantic Broadband fall in this?
I can't speak for Atlantic Broadband, but I can give you my best guess. They're not seeing this just in Middlesex. And not just Atlantic Broadband, any of the current ISPs that are serving rural markets are seeing this around the country. The government has poured money into this to the point where we can have 80% of this funded. And while it's still a hard decision for us, whether we're talking 800 or 1.1 million, it's within, I mean, we can reach it now. We couldn't reach 10.5 ever. So I think, you know, Atlantic Broadband and the ISPs of the world are probably having to adjust their business models to account for the notion that it's not business as usual anymore. But you know, this is not a grant that's intended to encourage competition. But at the same time, you know, if somebody moves into your neighborhood, you probably want to be observing who they are.
I have really gotten more complaints about how Atlantic Broadband does not return calls, has all sorts of problems. And as you know, they've really, for all practical purposes, closed their office here.
Yeah, it's been challenging, to say the least, to be the chair of the Broadband Authority and to be getting the same calls from my constituents while working on grant proposals where I'm working with Atlantic Broadband. They're small-ish, and frankly, they've got a lot of the same problem across a huge geographic footprint. They were slow to respond to COVID a year ago. They've gotten better. They've fallen back. They've been reminded to get better. You know, I don't want to carry their water, but at the same time, they are a partner of ours. And last year's grant, and we're putting in 140 new passes working with Atlantic Broadband. So this is a classic example where you want to make no enemies, and you want to push everybody to do better.
And Pete, if I may, I actually spoke with our local grant reps last week and expressed a now familiar sentiment that, yeah, we're still having problems with their customer service. And of course, Lud has spoken to them. And I think probably every board member has, and I know John has. What I was told is, take this for whatever it's worth, is that they were trying to hire more people. They have a hard time filling those positions. They're offering sign-on bonuses. And it's about a 6 to 8 week training period for their customer support. So take that for whatever it's worth. But they said, you know, we are hearing that they are trying to work on it, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's been a long time since we started this conversation. So.
All right. Well, like I say, I guess I need a motion for the board.
If you can, just one other comment. I like the idea of thinking of this funding as separate, perhaps as a separate borrowing. And one of the reasons is if we are fortunate enough to have some of the projects come through, like the storage facility as an example, that might be a way for us to service that debt that's essentially outside of our current budget. So if we keep it separate, we could address it separately and it wouldn't influence our operating budget.
And that reminds me, I didn't touch on this, Lud, but anytime you're taking out money for a project, the question is, when do I get my money back, right? Or often it is. And in this case, the payback truly is for the community. You'll see statistics about what having internet at a rural home that didn't previously have it adds to a home value. I think it's safe to say 5%. I've heard as much as 15%. So we're not only going to see tax revenue off of increased property value on 1,000 homes in a community where there's probably 4,000 lived in. It's significant, but it will trickle back in terms of actual tax base improvement. But more than that, it's not getting us ready for the next pandemic as much as it's getting us ready for the 21st century, and we're just 21 years late. Internet is I've got friends from my University of Richmond days who live from Cambodia to England to crazy places like Northern Virginia. I mean, all over the place. And they have different educational systems in place, and even between here and Northern Virginia. And with internet in the home, reliable broadband in the home, we are leveling the playing field. And we are also allowing those folks that are deciding between living here and anywhere in the world now, because post-pandemic, people are going to migrate. They already are starting. As we have opportunities to do more remotely, we make decisions based on what kind of education are my kids getting. And if we don't have broadband, we're cutting ourselves out of the market for a lot of the people that will be replenishing our community. We historically do not grow from within entirely. And so our ability to be competitive with rest of world, not just rest of state, is our payback. So just some thoughts about, we did a lot of work to turn this 10.5 million into an 800,000 to $1.15 million request, but there is a payback and it is keeping us current.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with the 800,000.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for 800,000 for this broadband project. Do we have a second?
If folks are looking at me, I'm respectfully going to ask the second come from somebody other than me so that I am not pushing too hard.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Pete, second by Lud. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, I just had a couple quick points. I think John did a very good job outlining the grant. The staff met on this. I had a staff meeting and we discussed it. So I think he's looking at it correctly. From the state's point of view, they're going to look at trying to extend the grant dollars to as many and as widely as possible. So if the county did have more skin in the game, a little bit more aggressive approach with how much we're putting forward, it definitely makes us more competitive in their eyes. So I would recommend the board consider leaning on more the aggressive side of that range that John gave. I'd also remind the board, as I have many times before, this unfortunately is a great time to do capital projects. I say unfortunately because we've had supply issues because of the pandemic, but the interest rates are still at historic lows. So we heard from the sheriff and his building needs. We have this project in front of us that we're probably going to need to figure out a way to fund if we're awarded a grant, which I'm optimistic we will be. You've got a perfect environment for debt issuance at historically low interest rates where we pay it back over the years to come. That being said, I'm a product right now this evening of the school's protocols where my son and I had to quarantine because of an exposure he had. This would not be possible if I lived in probably 2/3 of the county. This grant serves those unserved areas, and I would just like to chime in from administration's point of view that anytime you can leverage this amount of money from state and private sector sources and bring it here to Middlesex for what amounts to a relatively small match, and yes, I know I'm going to be quoted on that, but in the grand scheme of things, it still is. I think it's a good deal for the citizens in these unserved areas. And a couple of points I wanted to add, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All right, well, Matt, so what you're saying then, go for the maximum? Is that what you're saying?
I would lean towards that number, sir, because if we go in light with a $300,000 match, the state's going to say, yeah, if this community really wanted us, they'd probably put a little bit more skin in the game. And well, we've all heard working with our state contacts that Middlesex is perceived as a wealthy community. We are perceived that way in Richmond, whether it's right or wrong. They're going to look at how much we're putting forward. And I completely agree that it's a proper and great use for the ARPA monies because it's making our community more resilient throughout the rest of this pandemic. John's right on that it adds us, future-proofs our county a little bit too. And of course, I think all of us have witnessed some of the realtors in the area mentioned that they've lost sales because of lack of water, lack of sewer, lack of broadband. Broadband probably at the top of that list from many people's perspective. So I would, Mr. Chairman, I would definitely recommend leaning towards the more aggressive end of that pendulum.
All right, so based on that, you're saying that whether from the state in their eyes, they say, hey, this project is going to go.
Yeah,
That was
from the state eyes, and also
we're going to give them that extra amount of money.
That's correct, sir. And from the state's position too, they're looking at, okay, Middlesex County's got a great deal of skin in the game. Now we can utilize more state monies in other areas. What you need to find is that critical break-even point. And, you know, I depend on Kevin and John to know that number more than I. They're closer to it than I am. But we want to get that critical break-even number at least so the state continues to look at funding this grant request, potentially over some of our cohorts going for the money as well.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, right.
Are you saying, Matt, that you would go the 1.2 instead of the 800?
Well, the 800 is coming from ARPA. The 300,000 to 1.15 is the county contribution to the effort, not ARPA. That's over and above ARPA. Is that not correct, John?
No, so there's three scenarios. And in all three scenarios, 800,000 is coming from ARPA. In our scenario where we're asking for the most Virginia money and putting in the least county money at 300,000 county above ARPA, that's our lowest likelihood chance of winning this. Our highest likelihood, where we're almost guaranteeing it, we're putting in 1.15 million. I recommended 800,000, and I think what people are starting to hear is that I'm too fiscally conservative now that you're suggesting maybe we go a little bit higher than the 800,000 that I'm recommending. So 800 is my recommendation. It's somewhere in the middle. It doesn't guarantee us, but it doesn't make me think we have a 50-50 chance of getting the VATI money. So it is 800,000 ARPA. My recommendation is 800,000. The motion on the table is 800,000 from Pete. And I think Pete's question was, are you suggesting we approach that 1.15 as opposed to the 800,000 that I recommended?
I think the board should seriously consider something north of 800,000. Yes, sir. I don't want to lose the opportunity at this grant. I think Kevin and you have worked hard on it, and we're not guaranteed that we're going to have the ARPA monies come to us next year if we have to come back to VATI next year for the award. And again, historically low interest rates where we can finance this and be done with it.
Matt, Kevin, I'd like to hear from you. Just give me your input.
Well, I mean, Matt and I met with Betty the other day, and I'm kind of leaning toward Matt's side of the equation. Just all of the factors that are on the ground right now that have already been enumerated, from the ARPA money to the low interest rates to this synergy with Dominion. Will all of those factors be in place next year? We have no way of knowing that, but change is inevitable. It's almost a perfect opportunity. And guys, there's no guarantees we get it if we put it all in. You know, this is a very competitive bid. So for that reason, and given the fact that All Points is putting in as much as they are, which is quite a lot, much more than our last VATI grant application, where the private sector put in a much smaller
Is it
amount.
6.5 million, Kevin?
Correct. And last time it was, so that's about 60%, 62%. Last time it was more like 20% from the private sector.
It's 62% this year. It was 23.5 last year.
Yeah. So for all of those reasons, and I appreciate what John's saying, we're just trying to get right down the middle. I don't think this is the time to play chicken with the VATI grant. I would go all in given all of the factors at play, but that's my recommendation. If you want.
Well, I can tell you, you know, we had bad cell service in Jamaica. So anything we can get up in the county, I'm in favor for. That's what I would tell you. But I know we had a motion and it's been probably second. But Pete, I wish you could rescind your motion. Yeah, but I'm just going by Robert rules. Okay, we had a motion, been probably second.
Well, and I think there's been.
Well, I can.
And we got discussion. That's what it's all about. We're discussing. So.
But I can rescind it if I wish.
That's up to you.
But I'm going to look to John to give me some guidance on whether I should rescind it or not.
Well,
Thank you, John.
I think hot potato. I think it'd be appropriate to rescind it. I think if this were a marketplace, I'm hearing at least two others that are interested in doing a little bit more than that. So if you're not against doing more than that, then I think rescinding it might lead to an outcome where we get a majority all on the same page.
I'm going to pretend that I really know what I'm doing. Yes, I would like to rescind.
And then we have the rescind the second. Who had the second? Reggie?
I seconded it.
Your second. All right. Okay. All right. Now, Pete, you gonna put another motion in? What's the amount?
So the amount that I presented could be anywhere between 300,000 to 1.15. My recommendation was 800,000. The executive director over here has recommended 1.15 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recommend 1.15.
All right, we have a motion by Pete, 1.15. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Pete, second by Reggie. Any more discussion on this?
Yeah, I want to share a perspective. 3 weeks ago, I went to the Virginia Association of Counties meeting, and our keynote speaker was our governor. And our governor made the point that one of the things that the state of Virginia learned in COVID was we have to have broadband. And he said, I assure you that with our VATI funding, every location in Virginia will have broadband. Period. This is how it manifests itself with us trying to game a bid for funding in order to make sure that we can actually take advantage of that. And I just, you know, it's something that I've not been exposed to before, but I wanted everybody to understand that there's often a big difference between a proclamation that all teachers get a 5% raise or everybody in the state of Virginia gets broadband and the way that it actually comes to fruition when it gets to our desk. So it's just a perspective that I don't know that everybody has, because it certainly was new to me.
I'm glad you say that, because we can look to the beginning of the meeting today when the sheriff came in and he said the state said $3,000 to all LEOs, but now guess who's picking up the tab for as many others as we can that aren't funded under the state. And when the question asked about the part-time employees that were exposed to COVID at a similar rate with limited time, it still falls to the county. And I think you make a great point. I would much rather come in with a presentation that I could put a PowerPoint in front of you rather than try to not reveal too much that there's my competition, my fellow Virginians, my competition. I mean, you make a very good point. And I wish there was some way we could talk to Richmond directly and say, listen, when you're going to make those proclamations, you should have a supervisor from a rural county with you periodically to really let people know that none of this happens solely with the state money. And a lot of us are quabbling over the crumbs. And, you know, if we win this, that's great for us. But that means there's probably still other counties that are made the wrong calculation or didn't have the money set aside to do this. It's a great point, and thank you for calling it out.
All right.
Yeah, I got one more thing to say. And the part of me why I think we should go high is the feeling I got that it just won't, we didn't know about it in time when somebody else did. Therefore, when the governor said these things, you know, it's all everybody need broadband, but we just got to wake up and realize some things we got to take a little chance on because we want it. And once again, I'm gonna stick to, I just don't trust somebody, to be honest with you. It's simple as that. Therefore, we got to make our offer real good so we can get what we need, because somebody else is right on the line. I can guarantee you know exactly what we are doing. And they got somebody saying, this is where I want it at. And they're there fighting every day for us. And that's the kind of people we need in places that are fighting for what we know we need. We've been talking about broadband now for I don't know how long. Nothing up the county. We ain't got nothing up the county. I don't stay up the county, not one thing. We don't even have a restaurant. We don't have nothing. You know, so it's time for us to stop looking in different places and try to build a whole community. And with the whole community, I believe everything can be safe if we work together on it. And I'm gonna say again that I feel Mill 6 can be special. We're gonna disagree to agree. And it's a lot of opinionated, but it's a whole lot of truth. A whole lot of things is the truth. It's not two truths. Don't never let nobody fool you that it's two truths. And I'm gonna say this, then I'm gonna get out the way. Glass half full or half empty. You could get three things. Okay, I say it's half empty. You said half full. The gentleman walk up says it's an 8-ounce glass. You got 4 ounces in the glass. All of us are right. All of us can see that. And that, just like every other answer we get, is just as simple as a glass.
All right, we had a motion, probably second. Any more discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Abstain.
Mr. Mansfield,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye. Motion's okay. Good job. Right.
Mr. Chair, if I could just acknowledge Kevin and Anne Marie and the Broadband Authority. This is, and the members of the Broadband Authority before I took it over. This is a monumental day that essentially unanimously we can all agree that broadband is a priority. We've talked about it and now we're getting ready to do it. So everyone, fingers crossed until December when we find out about the Virginia grant. And I'm really proud of our authority and the work that went into this. So thank you to the authority.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate all the hard work. It's been long coming. I tell you. All right, next would be social service with line C, report only on page 65 and 66. Next, we have the community service board, performance contract, Linda Hodges. Is she here? Oh, yeah, okay. Page 67 to 83.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Jesse, members of the board, and Mr. Walker. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to present to you on the performance contract, and I thank you for your time this afternoon. I think you know Dr. Pirock here, who is the chairman of the Community Services Board, who's accompanied me today.
Thank you.
The state performance contract that's before us has two distinct dimensions. One is the financial component, and that's what you have, and the other is a service component. They were doing over the last year revisions to the performance contract, so we received it rather late in June. That's why I'm late coming here. You have, like I said, you have received the information about the financial component. Today, I'm requesting that you approve this performance contract through the resolution that we've submitted to the county administrator. Just a couple things about the services here in Middlesex. In fiscal year 2021 and 2022, Middlesex contributed $41,257 to our budget, that much each year. The budget for this year is over $28.5 million. We served in 2020, 455 individuals from Middlesex County, 185 individuals under the age of 18, and then 270 individuals over the age of 18. Prevention services added additional 164 services to individuals in the schools. Of these individuals, there were 28% that were non-insured, which means that their services were subsidized. That means about 127 individuals. So I also wanted to let you know that in 2020, and I don't have this year's information yet, that the Middle Peninsula Northern Neck CSB wage impact on Middlesex County was $1,299,872. That means the people employed by the CSB that reside in Middlesex County. So I'm open to questions about the performance contract if you have any.
Does any board member have any questions on the service contract? Not seeing any.
Okay. All right.
So thank you for that information. And
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for me?
That'll be it. The motion on service contract.
Yeah,
If I might
resolution
make
in your packet.
Resolution, yeah.
If I might make one comment, listening to the broadband discussion, it only strengthens the agency in terms of its services delivered, its educational, and its ability to reach out to people. Better broadband gives us a more powerful agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pearl. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution approval of the performance contract?
Yes.
We have a motion by Pete Mansfield. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Pete Mansfield, probably second by Reginald Williams. Any more discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield?
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried. Next, we have the Department of Wildlife and Resource, Mill Creek Landing, Steve Living.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board and staff. I'm here at the request of Mr. Kretz and Mr. Kuntz to discuss the potential transfer of responsibility for the site from DWR ultimately to the county. I'm not sure what would be most informative for you all, what depth of background you already have, or what I can provide to answer any questions you might have. Happy to provide a brief overview or just answer questions.
Right, well, a brief overview, but my understanding is DWR, okay. They're not going to do anything with the landing or improvement. Is that my question? That's my question.
Yeah, that's where we've landed. So by way of some background, this is a site that was actually under VDOT control. And in 1981, DWR, then the Game Commission, entered into a lease agreement for a number of sites across the coastal plain to provide boating access at those sites. These were old ferry landings or existing landings, but they really didn't fit with VDOT's transportation mission and more closely aligned with our public boating mission. Not all of those sites were developed, and in consequent lease renewals, some of those were dropped. The lease has been renewed and is now renewed through 2041. So DWR has had the full operational control and the capital improvements at those sites. We made a first capital improvement in 1994-95 and very quickly realized that there was an incredible rate of sedimentation at this site that was interfering with public access. In 2005, we initiated a capital project for dredging and extension of existing bulkheads to try to deal with that. We had, and I apologize that my capital and engineering section is currently moving their offices, so I didn't have full access to records. But the VMRC contribution to that, we accessed some saltwater fishing funds, was $85,000. I expect we probably matched that at 50%. And in 2013, that had been overwhelmed. And we came back and dredged again and did further bulkhead repairs and extensions. and found ourselves in 2017-18 fielding a lot of concerned comments from citizens that access to the ramp was increasingly difficult. We were seeing damage to watercraft from sand being sucked into engines and a lot of difficulty and danger in navigating. I actually came before this board in 2019 to talk about what we hoped was going to be our approach, which was to seek some funds from a number of sources. And we coordinated with the PDC through Louis Lawrence. We looked at some Port of Virginia funds that had actually been derived from some game department transfer monies. We looked at some grants for coastal resilience. And while I was researching that, I had our engineering staff looking at what a solution would look like. And what they kept coming back to is that there is nothing we can do to stop the rate of sand accumulation at the site. A massive capital project might extend the interval between dredging, but would make that dredging that much more expensive because we would have accumulated that much more sand at that time. So in October 2019, we actually did close the site. And at that time, Mr. Kuntz undertook to try to find a temporary and local solution. And he did find a contractor that was willing to remove sand from the site, basically for the clean fill material, and reopen the landing. So Mr. Kuntz and I and staff coordinated to get an MOU that allowed the county to manage a dredge under our existing permits. We moved forward with that. It was a lot of time and effort on Mr. Kuntz's part and a lot of input from my staff and myself as well. That lasted about 3 months before we saw that the ramp was rapidly closing in again. And by the time we reached this spring, we were probably more sanded in than we had been. And we kind of rallied for another effort similar to the previous. And I think in each of those cases, it was probably about 2,000 cubic yards of sand. Previous dredging had really removed 2,800 cubic yards of sand and 3,200 cubic yards of sand. So it really is, I don't see those rates of accumulation at any of the other ramps that the department manages in the coastal plain, and we have our finger in about 67 of them. So we've just, looking at those continued inputs, have made the difficult decision as a department that maintaining it as a motorized access site really isn't feasible with our resources. Mr. Kuntz asked if we would consider transferring to the county if the county felt they had a creative way forward, and we certainly don't want to stand in the way and would facilitate any kind of transfer with our partners at VDOT and with the county.
I'm glad you informed, so I wanted everybody to know what
Sure.
this is all about. So right now, the county don't own it, right?
Correct.
Okay, the county don't own it, but VDOT owns the roadway, right? The access to the landing.
Sure. So there is still, it's still a state road. It's Route 626. To the end of state maintenance, VDOT continues to maintain. Once it reaches the parcel that is under lease control, DWR is currently managing that parcel. It is a relatively small parcel for a boat ramp, gravel parking lot, not much beyond the footprint of the boat ramp. There is a county fishing pier at that site as well. And then there's the ramp. So it's currently, it gets odd when, we're two state entities. We talk about ownership. VDOT is technically the owner of the property on behalf of the Commonwealth, and DWR is leasing it from them through agreement.
Anybody got any more questions? With John?
Couple of questions.
Sure.
You said you had permits to do those maintenance dredges. Would the permits be transferable?
I would have to coordinate with my partners at VMRC and the Army Corps of Engineers in regards to that. We just renewed the Army Corps permit for another 5 years. I believe we have 4 on the VMRC permit. We would be happy to make that part of any transfer MOU similar to what we've executed twice already to coordinate with the county to allow them to operate under those permits.
And are there any maintenance requirements, obviously, other than trying to keep sand out of the ramp? Are there any other maintenance or safety or other requirements for leasing that property?
Again, some of that would be under VDOT's purview as to what their requirements were, but it's not overly onerous. It's a gravel parking lot. But we have not had the issues we have at some other ramps where that turns into a donut factory for local young drivers. So we haven't had to add a lot of gravel to that lot over the years, periodically, a dump truck and grading. And during the spring through early fall season, we mow probably on average every 2 weeks, depending on growing season and other staff obligations. Redecking a facility like that, we redecked a facility of a similar length. And I don't see an immediate need at this facility for that, but that would run, if you went back with one of the more modern composite materials, $5,000 to $8,000 likely for all materials. And we'd expect that to last 15 years. And honestly, the composite materials are close in cost to treated lumber right now, given the current state of the world.
Thank you.
I think I see here a finger bulkhead going out. Am I correct?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, you can see that groin to the right is extending out.
Yes.
Yep, and it has been overtopped in that footage, and that shoal was largely removed, and it's back.
Well, it's gone now.
Right. Oh, it had returned, and John coordinated the effort to remove it yet again.
Should it be increased in height? Or should it just simply be dredged?
So again, and I am not an engineer, so I'm simply relaying what's been evaluated by our lands and engineering division, but that increasing it in height would simply result in a higher dune forming on the right-hand side of that, and then eventually overtopping in the same way. So you would buy time while that storage was used up, but then you'd have to dredge that much more sand out from the side of the bulkhead to reestablish the storage. So again, you'd increase the interval of dredging, but also the expense.
Is there anyone that is interested in that sand and would dredge for the sand?
At the scale that it really needs to be removed, I think that's challenging. We have found that local contractors are interested in an amount that is usable for them. It is good, clean fill. It would have other uses for beach nourishment or other projects, but at the scale necessary to remove it, when we did it in 2013, we still paid $30 per cubic yard for removal, and we didn't pay any disposal fees. So we found folks that were willing to take it, but we still had to pay for the trucking fees. And at that point, that was about $74,000. In speaking with our project managers, $60 to $80 a cubic yard is more of a current rate.
I got a question, but I'm a little bit out of order. Is that Louis Lawrence back there? Louis, public water access. Come on up here for a minute. I know we have public water access, with the PDC. Would y'all be interested in taking it over? I'm asking a question. I saw you out there.
Yeah, so good evening. Good to see you all.
It's Louis Lawrence.
Louis Lawrence at the PDC. Matt had asked me to come in case you all asked this question. The Access Authority was created in 2003 to attend to any water access issues that you all want us to attend to. So the answer, generally speaking, every time a question like that is answered is absolutely. If that's what you all want, that's what we will do. However, the Access Authority has no ability to generate revenue. So as long as you all are writing the check to be able to offset the cost, we can find you solutions. Anticipating that this might be the direction that you all are going in, we've already submitted an application to the state under the flood fund. I think I've requested around $50,000 in engineering costs to try to figure out what a better solution might look like. Bigger, taller breakwater, the ability to think differently about how do we harvest that sand before it overtops. so that we would be in a better position to be able to help you all think through the mechanics of what options might be available and what those long-term costs might be. It's obvious that Mother Nature is deciding that she wants to put a lot of sand there now. Hasn't always been that way, but it's increasing with greater frequency. So if we don't begin to think through how to build it bigger, taller, and stronger, the problem doesn't go away. I think Steve's point is right on. But we haven't also focused 100% attention on, if that is what it's going to look like going forward, how do you manage against that so that you can keep the public's ability to use that ramp open and provide transportation access. So we can help you all if that's what you all want. I don't get a vote with the authority. I would have to go back to the authority. David is your member there. But I can tell you in the past, the authority has never said no to anything that local government has asked us to do. If there are costs, we would ask that you all carry those costs. If I can get somebody else to pay for that cost first, we will always do that. But in the end, any MOU to take that on, it's going to have a cost structure embedded in it that recognizes that there will be costs associated with it. And we will try to spread those costs out in a fair and equitable way. That's the best answer I've got for you.
Anybody have any more questions?
Not for Louis, but if you wouldn't mind staying up there, just in case we come back to the authority.
Sure.
Just a couple things to add, Mr. Chair, if I may. I initially thought DWR might be most efficient for DWR to get out of the way, so to speak. But, in listening to the county administrator get nervous about the idea of us taking on an additional asset and the operations and maintenance, I think perhaps what might make the most sense is to engage Louis and the PDC to do what they've already done and pursue grant funding so that we can write an RFP for an engineered solution. And while I respect Stephen's engineering department, in my mind, I want a second opinion. I want to do an RFP to go and see the engineered solution and use the funding that comes from this grant, assuming we get it. But I don't necessarily want to kick DWR out of this. My hope is that DWR would say, if I can still have an open ramp, even with only 10 or 12 parking spaces, but I don't have an issue with the dredging that we see as too expensive, then sure, we'll keep our name on it. We'll mow the grass. We'll keep operating the, gravel fixes, et cetera. But what I want to do is sort of find out if it was $100,000 problem and their budget said, we just can't come up with $100,000 for this, but it turns out they would come up with $30,000 and we can find some grant monies periodically. What this ramp needs is A, to stay in use, but B, it needs the RFP to go out and find out what the true costs are. So I don't think we have to change the position of who's on the lease right now. I just want the authority to go out, run a proper RFP, hopefully with funding that we've gotten a grant. And I think for much less than $50,000, we can get a couple different interpretations from engineers on what the cost would be, what the solution would be. Two other little things that I'll add. One of the stopgap measures, because we try to learn from one year to the next, one of the stopgap measures that we approved is just to the east of the seawall. Matt, if you've got your cursor out and want to show us to the east of, nope, off the ramp up the seawall. Yep, just to the east, still on DWR property, we've installed sand fencing with the intention of actually creating the dunes that Stephen referred to buy us more time. And we don't know if it'll happen quickly. We don't know if once it happens, it will stop or slow sand. But we've tried to buy ourselves some time and carve out space to put the RFP together and really get what the decision makers need, which is how much does it cost? How often will we be dredging still after this is done? But I really think instead of trying to say DWR, you're dismissed, the county's going to take it over. Is that okay with you, VDOT? And finding out that is fine. I think what we want to do is keep the construct as it is currently with the permission of DWR, run the RFP, and then as a team, look at the costs and see, can we split this somehow to keep this open? And whether we look at it as DWR subsidizing us or us subsidizing DWR and finding grant funds, is irrelevant. The point is, in my district, this is a huge asset, and it's not just for recreational boaters, which is important to our economy in that part of the Rappahannock, but it's to some watermen that are hanging on. And if they can't get out, I see John Augustine down there almost every time I'm down there. He goes to Guinea first and then comes here. And now, because when it's open, he can't find a parking spot. So he has to figure out a different schedule to make sure he can check all his pots. As soon as it closes up, he's the only one there, and it's fine for him to take 45 minutes to meander out with his boat and try to get through. So the point in all this is we need to stay open, creative, and collaborative to the extent that the agencies are willing to allow us to do that. And given the permission, I'd just like for DWR and the county to agree that I can go out and run an RFP paid for with grant monies that we don't have yet. If not, then I'd like the county to consider us being proactive in funding such an RFP so that we can get the information we need to make a determination if this is, thank you, DWR, we'd like the property now, or if it's, hey, DWR, we need a deeper collaboration and maybe a revision to our understanding so that we can pump some money in, whether it's from grants or other, to keeping this asset open. That would be my ask of the board, assuming DWR is okay with us proceeding that way.
The challenge from DWR's perspective is that I expect that by this winter, we'll be in the same state we were, and we'll be closed again this spring. And kind of the repetitive cycle is taxing on you, on county staff. And there was a huge input on my part to keep those permits managed. There's ongoing consultations for endangered species. I'm terrified every spring that I'm going to find little holes at the high tide line that would indicate that we're not doing any work there because there's Northeast Beach tiger beetle. So that's all part and parcel. The department has a hard time seeing any solution that isn't a truly massive input. And what we have communicated to staff and the board previously is that we would much rather see those funds and look for a site where we can house more than 8 or 9 trailers if everybody parks just right and pretty close to each other. I'd much rather see a facility that could accommodate 50 and then really provide for boaters of the Commonwealth and the local community and be an economic driver for the county as well. We're not averse to investment, but we're trying to be as smart as we can with the limited funds that we have. Our capital program budget. Oh, Matt, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could that be part of an RFP that John is referring to? Try to do a cost benefit analysis and just kind of a very preliminary survey of the surrounding area to see if there's other more hospitable sites.
Yeah, certainly. I think that would make sense. Again, we're in the business of public boating access, so we're not looking to get out. And we do maintain 2 other ramps within the county that are also part of this DDOT lease. The ramp at Saluda and the ramp at Millstone. Those are DWR managed ramps. And we don't plan on pulling up stakes and leaving Middlesex County, and we're never closing the door to collaboration. But we are going to be as careful as we can be with very limited dollars. You understand the circumstances we find ourselves in. We have enough capital program money to do 1 plan and 1 boat ramp renovation every year, and we have 230 ramps under our purview. So we have to be very, very selective in how we direct those funds to make sure we're getting the return on investment for the anglers and boaters of Virginia.
Okay. Got any more questions from the board?
If no one else will make a motion, I'll make my own. I move that we authorize the administration to write an RFP soliciting engineered solutions for Mill Creek boat ramp, a sand mitigation strategy that will also incorporate a study of surrounding areas that might be considered better alternatives.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can ask John, could part of that motion be that we would engage the services of Louis and the Chesapeake Bay Middle Peninsula Public Access Authority to lean on their expertise in kind of drafting the right type of RFP?
If you need that in the motion, Matt, we can do that, but really it's implied that you're going to leverage any resources that are available to us.
Yeah, well, it's more of a question to you and Louis, if his staff could help us out with that, because they have a wealth more expertise in matters like this than my staff does.
Yeah, part of that, Matt, it's a whole lot easier for political subdivisions to work with political subdivisions. And so we would go directly down to our shoreline design folks at VIMS who handle most of all of this work for us, in which case we don't have to issue an RFP for that. So if you go the RFP route, you're stepping into the space of going on the private sector side. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if we're successful with the funding, I can move money laterally into that space at VIMS, and we can bypass a lot of the red tape that's more traditionally involved with it, just because it's easier for us to go one direction than another. Doesn't make any difference. If you all want to go to the private sector, that's fine too, or you can do a combination of both.
If I may rescind my motion, Mr. Chair, I'd like to rescind it and replace it with, I move that we authorize the administration to work with Louis, the PDC, and all the resources we can bring to bear to most efficiently work on an engineered solution, whether it's through a RFP to the private sector or through existing resources that we have disposable to us, whatever is efficient. But I want to make it a project that we are updating on a monthly basis.
We have that motion by John. Do we have a second?
A second.
Motion by John, probably second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
So I just would add, and so this is something that I will take to the division administration for our wildlife division. But the stance of the department, prior to me coming to this meeting, was that we were not going to engage in any further dredging and maintenance at this site as things stand currently. So if we end up closed while we're in this process, I don't know that we would kind of go through the same calisthenics to get a dredge done this spring if we end up where we're closed. I'm speaking to my level of authority. I don't have the capacity to change that. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't coordinate.
Yeah. So Stephen, if respectful of all that you've done shoulder to shoulder with us to clear the thing out the last 2 years, if someone over you is telling you that we're not doing what we've been doing, and leaving us a bit in a lurch, knowing that this is coming next spring, let's not wait. Let's have that conversation. I'll be happy to have a face-to-face with whoever's saying that you can't cooperate going forward, or maybe that's not how they're saying it, but.
Well, I don't think it was meant in that vein. It was simply the acknowledgement that this is the problem, and we don't see an engineered solution, and it was time to step away.
Yep, and understood. Yeah. I guess I'm just saying I can easily foresee a circumstance where, whether I like it or not, we're trying to pull sand out of there again next year. And if DWR is saying that's not what we really intended with the MOU, once was funny, twice is silly, third time's no, then rather than just sort of say hands up, let me know what we can and can't do and what support we can expect, and we'll cooperate. But if it's just straight up, we're not helping, then I want to elevate the conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, and if I may, Steve, I'll kind of give you a kinder, gentler view of that. I think your cooperation and coordination on this project is going to be just greatly desired and needed. Even if we engage the services of VIMS, they're going to need to have some input from you all, especially if we're looking at canvassing the surrounding areas for other potentially more beneficial sites. So is it something that you're going to be able to coordinate with Louis and I on with VIMS?
Oh, to that standpoint, yeah, absolutely. I don't see
Okay.
any difficulties with the department coordinating to find a solution, committing to this ramp staying open forever, no matter what. I don't know that that's something I can commit to.
Right.
But we're absolutely willing to work. And I think utilizing the PDC and hopefully VIMS is probably the way to go. I fear that for $50,000, you wouldn't get a good engineering drawing out of the A&E firms that we're typically using under state contract.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of cost savings potentially through this route.
And Louis, while I've got you, not to put you on the hot seat, I really appreciate you being here tonight or being there tonight. What kind of an ETA do you think VIMS would need on doing something that we're looking for? Doing something like
I think
what we're looking
DCR is supposed to provide announcements on the grant round number 1 sometime in mid to late October. So once we know whether or not it's funded, then it's a conversation with the VIMS folks about how much time they might need. We've had some preliminary conversations with Scott Hardaway, and he has some idea what in the perfect world he thinks needs to be done down there. So I don't think it's going to take a tremendous amount of time for them to do it. But if you all want a harder deadline, I can get that from him. The question really becomes, if I got resources coming from DCR to do it, then we've got some oil to put on the squeak. If they don't fund it, then it's a different question. What do you all want to pay VIMS to do it?
Yeah.
Sometimes I can get them to do a lot of work for us for free, but sometimes they can't. So it really just depends on who can pay for the time to get the work done. And we'll have a better picture of that in October, unless you all want to go ahead and fund it. And then, we can use the grant money to reimburse. That's another avenue. But we don't have to know an answer to that right now because, nothing's going to change with the sand in the next 30 days. It's still going to be there.
Well, it sounds like we probably need to sit down with VIMS and kind of scope this out and see what we can get from them and how best to go about the study.
Yeah, and they're not going to make recommendations as to where another boat ramp should go. What they can help you do is once a site is identified, they can help say, yeah, this site looks good. There won't be a lot of sand transport here. This site will stay open. They can help on that, but they're not going to go out as part of the resources from DCR, nor would that even be permissible with those funds. Those funds have to be limited to a design solution that end up with a more nature-based solution at the end of the day that manages that sand that's coming in there in a way that adds some value and keeps the ramp open.
That's probably more a fitting role from Steve and DWR to look at available sites once we can identify potential prospects and get a good feel from them on where the site should go if that's part of this.
Yeah, I think there's a collaboration between county staff and DWR staff. If we can evaluate parcels and make site visits, that's something that the department can certainly do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I've still got an observation more than a question. It appears that the sand is topping the finger, but which could be in some ways a good thing. If you went up with that finger another couple of feet, the sand is then going to start causing it to have to go around.
Well, no, I think you'd end up with a higher dune. And that's our fear. And that's what our engineering evaluation showed, is that you would store sand for longer, but eventually it's still going to come over the top.
Well, and then the other thing, and we mentioned this, I think, in our grant application, if you look to the east, those seawalls have largely been decimated and not replaced or repaired. There's been some trees that have fallen down. You can actually see just east off of our property is a tree that's laying there. I think it's actually driftwood, but we've lost some of the buffers that we may have had 20 years ago. And, there are some things that are inexplicable and some that you can conjecture. But, short of those points being repaired, which we can't compel, that's likely the source of a lot of the sand that we see coming in. Storms, winds, And, if you notice, there's also a lake that nobody's talking about yet, but that's on the neighboring property. And that used to drain out right where you see it drain out. But that sand has come in and filled that in such a way that it's changed the path of that tidal egress and regress. It comes in and out of our seawall. And I've thought about, a valve that can only go one way. So that when it's the right tide and it's draining, that's fine. But when it's the wrong tide, it's not refilling this thing so that it just keeps moving sand and water through the area. But I'm no engineer. I'm just a guy that's tired of digging in the sand.
Well, and as we speak about that, one of the challenges to keep in mind is that where Matt's cursor is right now is actually past the property point of control. So what we control and have the ability to manipulate is fairly small. So a lot of the solutions we're talking about would have to take place on private property or would impact private property.
That would be subaqueous bottoms of the Commonwealth. It's not private. If that's gone waterward of the mean low water, then that becomes Commonwealth property.
That's above mean low.
Right, but it's moving out and replacing it. So I think that legal ownership question.
Well, that would be resolved, but we do have, it's platted out and we do have property lines from at least existing historic.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I've been the one wanting this meeting for months and I'm glad we're having it, but I think we have a motion that gets us to the point, if we go ahead and vote on it, that we're going to turn these experts together to collaborate and get us an update and see where we go from here. We're not at a decision-making point other than let's have a project. Let's cut county administration loose with Louis to see if we can get some answers.
Mr. Mansfield. Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Jessup.
Aye, motion so carried. Thank you. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you all.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, can we take a brief
Yeah,
recess?
let's take about a 5-minute break, 5 or 10-minute break. and
Thank
we'll
you.
get right back. 'Cause I think we've been at it for a good little while. Oh, my gosh.
Kevin, I'm going to give you a call on your cell phone.
Okay. Wow.
Hey, Wayne, I just want you to know, we got it on the record that John Coons called himself a fiscal conservative.
Like to call the meeting back to order. I had to hit it so y'all can pay attention here now. All right. Virginia Transportation, we don't need them now. So now we're on the Economic Development Authority update. Memorandum of understanding between the EDA and the Board of Supervisors regarding the RCE building. Gordon White. How you doing, Gordon? All right. Is that mic on?
I never seen any red lights. Well, I have a statement to kind of explain where we are. After the brew pub project collapsed last year because of COVID, the authority sought another developer to use the offered state grants. But despite our best efforts, no one stepped forward who could use them, and the state agencies withdrew them last spring. I have to say that to a degree, the requirements that came along with those grants made it difficult to use them. However, the authority searched for a broker with business real estate expertise, and after looking at several in Middlesex, we found one in Richmond who was in touch with business possibilities. At this point, he's brought us a potential developer who has offered a contract to build a retail establishment, excuse me, on the former RCE site. The contract has not yet been finalized, but we hope to be able to do that shortly. Since meeting all the procedural requirements for this project, DEQ, VDOT, building permits and all that, it's likely to take more than the 5 months left on the EDA's ownership of the site. We're asking the board to extend our ownership and to also free up the grant that the board made originally to repair the roof of the RCE building, to change it to cover whatever site preparation might be needed for this project, including a provision to continue electrical service to the KID building and water service to that and other county buildings in the area until the water authority facilities are connected. As the board has already transferred the grant money to the EDA, there would be no new expense to the county's treasury. And we're also specifying that a plaque be erected on the site to memorialize the former RC school. If the present proposal comes to fruition, we anticipate the site going back onto the county's tax rolls at a valuation of about $2.25 million, which would bring in, by my arithmetic, nearly $14,000 in real estate tax. And in addition, the developers would be hiring between 10 and 20 employees and possibly doing as much as $4 million in business a year, thus generating significant sales tax income. We see this business as anchoring Cook's Corners as a retail center with benefits to the entire area. I'll be glad to answer questions, and then I will speak separately about the progress of hiring a replacement for Michelle Brown. Question?
One question, Gordon, and if I missed it, I apologize. Is there a forecast on how many jobs this entity would create with this facility?
Well, looking at establishments of the same size that this company has run across the country, our estimate is between 10 and 20 employees.
Full-time?
Probably 10 beginning, and as it got more customer base, it might go as high as 20.
Thank you.
I got one question about the roof. What would you say about the roof?
Well, the original memorandum of understanding between the EDA and the county was that the $100,000 was to repair the roof. As things progressed, both the cost of a roof and the usefulness of that building have changed, and we would like to have the county change that $100,000 to be usable for a preparation of the site.
What type of preparation are you talking about? You say you're gonna sell the building.
Well, we're going to sell the site.
You're gonna sell the site.
Frankly, the building is in very deteriorated condition, and in many ways, it doesn't meet code. And the best estimate we have to bring it up to code would be over $1 million. And there is nobody has any possibility of using the building at that expense.
Anybody have any more questions? Heather, how you look at the memorandum of understanding? Just say everything looks good.
Yes, sir. I drafted it, so I'm gonna say I had an inner dialogue with myself.
Hey, I'm just making
No,
sure.
no, you're fine.
I'm just making sure.
I thought it looked like an excellently crafted document.
All right. So if it's not any more questions.
I'd like to make a motion,
Make a
Mr.
motion.
Chair. I'd like to authorize the chairman to execute this fully and offer our full support on this project for the enhancement of that portion of our community.
Have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by John, probably second by Pete. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye. Motion so carried.
Now, I will comment on our effort to hire a replacement for Michelle Brown. She left us on only 3 weeks' notice, which was far too little time in which to hire a replacement. Frankly, if we'd had about 3 months, it would have been a lot easier. We have advertised for replacement in the local newspapers, on various Middle Peninsula and state websites, and on LinkedIn, which is an internet job placement site. We received 21 resumes from as far away as California, Florida, and New York and Texas. However, we asked all of those people to fill out the county application form on the county website, and only 5 have done that. Of those, 1 has already taken another job. 1 is asking $150,000, which we can't afford to pay. And at this point, we've narrowed the field and asked Anne Marie to run the county's verification process on the remaining candidates. And we hope to make a decision at our September 16th meeting on those candidates. Any question?
All right, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Broad, okay, we got that. All right. HRSD sewer update. Oh, hold up. I skipped something. I mean, because we moved this. Signature and time, permission to excerpt for Jamie Barnhart. Is request for the use of portion of Larry Chunin's signature and time.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead with the motion.
Per page 86 in the agenda, Mr. Barnhart has laid out that this is simply we have the authority to grant permission to use these excerpts, and anything that encourages more readership of some of our authors in the community and specifically our subject matter experts on the history of Middlesex County, I would strongly encourage us to approve that. So my motion is that we approve allowing the use of the experts excerpts.
All right, we have a motion to approve the experts in the Jamie Barnhart book. Do we have a second? We have a motion by John. Do we have a second? Motion by John, probably second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield,
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. Now, HRSD sewer update.
Chairman Board, I appreciate the time that you're providing HRSD. Just a quick update on the various projects that HRSD is managing for the County of Middlesex and various projects that HRSD is managing on HRSD's behalf. We have our what we call MP 013500, which is the Middlesex Collection System Cook's Corner. That's the service area that's going to be servicing the Cook's Corner area. And right now we have completed all but one easement acquisition and 2 additional easement and property acquisitions with the County of Middlesex. We are expecting the one easement to be finalized within the next 2 weeks, and then the additional easements, I believe, are being discussed later today, and property acquisition. We have worked through the environmental assessment or the categorical exclusion with the DEQ, and they've requested a environmental assessment, which is projected to take about 8 weeks from start, which started at the end of last week. So we're looking at end of December or October for the design phase to be completed. And then we will be going into bid early November, as long as everything gets checked out. And the category or the environmental assessment is HRSD and DEQ contacting the various different entities within Virginia to make sure that there's no conflicts with the property that we're planning to put the pump station at. Then we have our MP 013600, which is the Middlesex Interceptor Force Main Phase 1, which is the force main that's going from the Cook's Corner service area to the Saluda, or right outside of the VDOT residency. That project has been substantially complete as of August 26, 2021. No further updates. There'll be some restorations there over the next few weeks as the project finalizes, as it closes out. Then we go into our larger force main projects, and we split that up into 3 separate projects themselves. We have MP 013710 Interceptor System Program Phase 2, the Saluda Pump Station, which is right behind the building here. That's going to be replacing the existing Central Middlesex treatment plant. That is about a month and a half behind schedule currently, and it kind of goes in line with the rest of the projects. It's not that that project in particular is behind schedule, but the overall program is about a month and a half behind schedule. We're thinking we can make that up in construction right now, but currently, but we're looking at utilizing the site beside the existing treatment plant. That's a parking lot owned by the county jail, and we're in talks with the jail right now to acquire that property. and go from there. But there is some talks about other locations, but that's the current location we're looking at right now. MP 013720 Middlesex Interceptor System Program Phase 2, the Hartfield Pump Station. That one is, we are currently going through some property acquisitions, and we're expecting that to be finalized by the end of in 2 to 3 weeks off of White Oak, or not, I'm sorry, not Wright Brothers Road. Behind the Family Dollar is the chosen site for that Hartfield Pump Station. And that also has a force main going from the transmission force main going into it. MP 013730 Interceptor System Program Phase 2 Transmission Force Main. This is the one that's kind of pushing the schedule back by about a month and a half, is the property acquisitions for the Locust Hill service area, along with the property acquisition for the Gloucester Booster Station and the Urbana Pump Station that we are looking to construct. That also goes into the decommissioning of the Urbana treatment plant. With that, it's really just property acquisition that's slowing us down, but we finished the majority of the survey. There is also just fair warning that there are some letters being sent out to multiple residents that are within that corridor that we're looking to acquire some easements from. So I have been getting calls, and I'm not sure if anybody else has been getting calls on that or any concerns, but we're just looking to acquire some easements. So we're looking about 70+ easements in that corridor from Urbana to off of Twig Ferries Road. And then we have MP 014510 Middlesex Collection System Saluda Service Area Phase 1. This is a county-funded project that HRSD is managing. That one is in the PER phase currently. We've just received the tech memo for that, and we're going through design review next week. And comments are going to be sent to the consultant within 2 weeks of that. MP 014410 Middlesex County Hartfield Collection System Phase 1 PER. That one, same situation as the Saluda service area, and these are both just collection systems or gravity systems going from various connectors. The Saluda, I should have mentioned, is just 2 manholes outside off of General Puller Highway to get across the street, across General Puller, and going down towards the School Street, 1 manhole. The Hartfield collection system is going from Regent all the way to as close as we can to the YMCA with the gravity sewer with the set pump station site for the Hartfield pump station. Currently, we're looking at ending design for those various 5 projects. End of March or beginning of March, I apologize, and then going into the bid phase, which is projected to take about 3 months. And then award and go into construction June 1st. We're projecting 23 months to 26 months right now. Currently, the schedule's showing 23 months. But that's obviously up for changes as more information comes about. And those are all the current active projects right now for HRSD.
Right.
Any questions?
Board member has any questions?
I have 2 questions. One for the administration. Could we include this slide that's on the screen in the board packet going forward every month? If it's made available to us, it'd be nice for us to be able to study it. Matt, is that something that we can accommodate?
Absolutely. If I can get it from Jeremiah before the packet goes out.
Jeremiah, would you mind sending that to the county administrator a week before these meetings?
If it's possible, I don't see a reason why not.
Okay, perfect. And then the second comment is for you, Mr. Burford. At the top of the page, you have in blue writing, could you scroll up, Kevin? Under, for example, MPO 13500, currently conducting an environmental assessment, design phase end date, bid phase construction. Could we add similar high-level notes for any of the other currently active projects that just give us a high-level view of how far out we are? And then we can just track over time whether things are slipping, as opposed to getting your update and sort of saying, well, where were we last month? If the way you have it there in the blue writing for the top 2 orange boxes, is very helpful. Would you be willing to add that to the lower orange boxes?
Yeah, if you actually scroll down just a little bit. This isn't, I'm still learning Visio, so it's right there saying the schedule, but it's not the cleanest way. Once I get a little more proficient with it, it'll look cleaner. But that gives you the schedule.
I am in a role in my private sector life where I'm learning new software and it's maddening, but the information that you have there is really the stuff that, speaking only for myself, that's what I want to understand is how we're coming along versus last month. And just in general, when my constituents ask to be able to refer to this document and say, well, that station's not going to be done with engineering until such and such. If I had all the information here, it'd be extremely helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes. I wrote Ted Hennepin a letter which he was quite irritated that I wrote. But there is a potential $1.5 million savings to you for each year earlier. You can close the Urbana and the Saluda waste treatment plants. But do you all agree with that? That the sooner that you can close those plants, you'll save $1.5 million.
Yeah, the goal is to complete them as soon as possible.
And I'm basing it on your numbers. I think it's $27 of let's see, 1,000 gallons for treatment in a small waste treatment plant. Isn't that your?
I'm not familiar with the cost of running the treatment plant or the operation cost.
Compared to your Yorktown plant, which does it for $2.
It sounds right, but I'm not positive. Yeah.
Well, based on the numbers, it's a $1.5 million savings. So first of all, Ted was incorrect in assuming that I was criticizing. I really do appreciate HRSD doing what you're doing. And I'm not criticizing HRSD whatsoever. I just really want to get the wastewater out of Urbana Creek as soon as possible because it really is polluting the creek. It's out of control. I'm not blaming HRSD. That plant's been around for 200 years now or something like that. So no one's blaming HRSD for it. But the fact is the 50,000 gallons per day is going into Urbana Creek, and it is not within the state requirements for nitrogen and phosphorus. So it really means a lot to us if you can get it out as soon as possible, but it also means $1.5 million to you all. So what I was asking Ted to do is look through your schedule and see if there's any possible way of making that connection to the Yorktown Matthews line as soon as possible and get those two plants offline. Not criticizing HRSD. Ted Hennepin, I would vote for governor in a heartbeat.
No, I understand your concern, and it's also being taken into consideration with the schedule. We're always looking for ways to accelerate the schedule, but right now easement acquisition is slow with COVID and people not willing to talk to a lot of people, but we're pushing through and we're working to get these projects done, get the treatment plants decommissioned, get pump stations built, and serve Middlesex as a whole. That's the #1 goal for us right now.
Okay, but you understand Pete Mansfield is not criticizing HRSD.
No, I don't think I haven't spoken to Ted about that, so I'm not familiar with the letter that was sent or anything, but there was.
If you do speak to him, say what a nice guy he looks like.
That won't be an issue. I'll let him know. I'll make sure he understands where you're coming from.
Thank you, sir.
Not a problem.
I got one question. Are y'all planning on completing the project before you cross the river? So in other words, when you get to Deltaville, you get to Grace Point, you're taking out Saluda. when we get to Hartfield, are they gonna take the line over to tie into the line for Matthews before they go to Deltaville? Are they gonna complete the whole project before they decide to, to make the turn?
So going to Deltaville, that's actually on the sheets, and I'm sorry that no one has it in front of them, but it's HRSD's project MP 013800, Middlesex Interceptor Program Phase 3. That currently is not an active project for HRSD. I believe HRSD and Middlesex are working through some logistics on the agreement between HRSD and Middlesex to make sure that we understand where the demarcation line is between the two ownerships or cost responsibility. And I believe it's either in the works or it's been finalized within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And that project will become an active project, and we'll be working on it in tandem with any other projects that we have. But I believe that one will need to be approved by the Board of Supervisors of Middlesex before we move forward with doing anything going down Deltaville.
So right now, if I were asking you about the lines that's tying and we get to Hartfield, we got Grace Point on sewer. Are we gonna take the line across the river to tie into Matthews line before we go to Deltaville?
Currently, that's the projected schedule because we have no active projects going to Deltaville.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it won't change right now, but that's currently, we have no
I'm just
active
trying to
project.
see where you're at. I just think it make more sense. Keep straight on across the bridge and get somebody on it before y'all decide to go another 15 miles, to hook in everything else. That's all I'm saying. I'm just wondering how that is.
No, the current schedule is going across the river by, I have here, June of 2024 is the current projection. Now, any of the branch lines going to Topping or Deltaville or Bethpage will all need to be active projects, and then we pursue them with an understanding of where we are with those service areas. I think if I understand, Deltaville is just starting design. Topping is just starting design as well. So without knowing their intimate schedule, I'm not going to be able to understand where we are going to start building interceptors.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, and just to chime in, Jeremiah, that's actually the next item on the agenda is a board letter requesting and authorizing design and construction of the topping connector and design of the Deltaville interceptor main, and that'll be discussed next. So we have worked that out.
Okay. Anybody else have any more questions for Jeremiah? If not, all right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
All right. Next would be B. That's for you, Matt Walker, topping interceptor main connected to
Yes,
Deltaville
sir.
interceptor extension.
Yes, sir. You have a copy of a draft letter in your board packet, Mr. Chairman, that simply requests HRSD begin design and potentially construction after they go to bid, of course, with the topping connector and begin design of the Deltaville connector. I'm going to share my screen again real quickly if I can to kind of illustrate the Deltaville connector, which is perhaps the most costly. Of course, as Jeremiah has just informed the board, they're still working on the interceptor main that's going across to Matthews County and ultimately to Yorktown, or York County rather. The Deltaville connector would be an interceptor main designed and ultimately constructed at HRSD's expense, roughly down to Hardyville, rough area, pretty much crossroad from Parsons Lane. And then everything east of that would be the county responsibility for the collection system in Deltaville. The connector and topping is just north of 33, so it's not anything needed to be seen on a map. It's just north of 33. So the letter in your packet requests HRSD incorporate those designs and potentially incorporate in bid of the interceptor main for the topping connector. And that would in turn allow the county to connect the topping sewer system into the interceptor main and continue design concurrently with the interceptor main project. The Deltaville project is slightly behind the topping project because it's a lot more complex. There's some supplemental preliminary engineering that we're working on with Timmons, We hope to have that knocked out in the next couple of months and hopefully have something back in front of the board for an update from Timmons in Deltaville. But we feel like this letter in the discussions with Jay Dano and the top brass down at Hampton Roads Sanitation District, we feel like this letter authorizing them to incorporate the design is timely and necessary for both the connector for Topping and Deltaville.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion if you'd like.
Yes, if Matt's finished. All right, we like to have a motion at this time.
Yeah, I move that we authorize the chair to execute the letter to Governor Hennepin.
Pretty sure he doesn't want that job.
We have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
A second?
A motion by John, probably second by Lud. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Coombs? Mr. Coombs?
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield? Aye. Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried. And next, you're not gonna believe it, I don't know what I did with my agenda.
It's the HRSD pump station deed of conveyance
here
and
we go.
easements,
All
pages
right.
89.
Next, I'll be on page 89, HRSD, pump station deed, conveyance and easement. Heather Lewis and Matt Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, do you want to start anything off or you want me to just take the ball rolling?
Yeah, if you could you pull up the packet information that kind of depicts it on the screen for everyone? I think that would be helpful.
Sure, it's page 89. So while we're doing that, there are two things that we're going to be asking you to do. The first is a deed of conveyance, which will need to go to public hearing if that's the board's will. And then there are 3 easements that staff is seeking the board's approval of. So we'll start first with the deed of conveyance on page 89. If, Kevin, can you scroll down just a little bit? There should be an exhibit attached. Keep going.
Yeah, it was those exhibits I think people could get the most out of.
There you go. Okay, right there. There you go. Can you blow that up a little bit? Thank you. All right, Matt, I'll let you explain what we're looking at here and where.
Yeah, be happy to. And I tell you what I'll do, if I may. I know I've been monopolizing the Google Earth, but I'm gonna share my screen one more time to kind of give the board a depiction of where that site is so they can kind of triangulate where it is. Okay, so we're in Cook's Corner now. And what that easement shows, the property line, the county owns pretty much everything west of this line, roughly. The lift station or sewer pump station would be located right back here in these trees. And the easement that Heather's going to show you on that exhibit pretty much follows the access power lines and I believe the utilities coming in and out of the pump station, the force main coming out and some of the collection going in. So roughly in this area.
Thank you, Matt. Let's start with that one. So the first one is the deed of conveyance. And as Matt was outlining, what the county and HRSD are proposing is that's county-owned property that would be subdivided, which HRSD is already in the process of doing that. And that property would be subdivided. And so this would be property that HRSD would own. So it does require a public hearing. So for the first item, what we're asking is your approval to set this for a public hearing at the October meeting with the purpose that you're conveying this to HRSD for a pump station. And then we'll have a public hearing on that and then the board would vote. So if that's your desire, I'd ask please for a vote. That's the first one.
We like that, well, we'd like to have someone take a motion on that.
So move. Second.
A motion, probably second, motion by John, probably second by Reggie. Okay, motion by Reggie, probably second by John. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Mansfield?
Aye.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. Okay.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on. If Kevin, you'll scroll down. Thank you. There you go. All right, Matt. So the first one is, now these are up for the board to take action. We're going to do them individually. So the first one is a deed of sanitary sewer easement, and you'll see the exhibit there. And I'm going to let Matt describe for you. That's down at Cook's Corner as well, but on the opposite side of the road. So Matt.
Okay.
I'm going to do the tag team sharing of screen.
I just tap, you're it.
Yeah. Okay, so this next easement is roughly in this area between Dr. Davila's office and I believe is that what the barber shop is? I believe it is.
No, that's Lawrence Facilla. Property.
Yeah, the car wash is right here.
Yeah.
So I believe it's
Yeah,
right here is what we're referring to. Is that correct, Heather?
That's my best understanding. I think we still have Jeremiah here too. So if we have any questions.
Well,
Lawrence Facilla owns that.
Okay, so
yeah,
what
it's
we're,
across the
what
road
we're
from
giving,
me, sorry.
yeah, we're giving an easement to HRSD. So this is not a fee simple conveyance. This is an easement. So by statute, you're allowed to take action on this one without a public hearing. So this is your first one. This is for tax map 27-177. They are asking for a sewer easement. What say the board?
All right, do we have a motion for that tax 27-2177?
Could we do all three at the same time?
We can.
Sure, I'm sorry, that's fine. I just
Okay,
was.
go ahead and do it all. We do it all at once.
Okay, so now we're on to the next one's going to be tax map 27-179A. I'm going to scroll down and show you that exhibit. And this is in that same general area is my understanding. And then your third one is for 27-122A. And you're going to see that this is actually for the access. This is going back to the other side of the street to where the kid building is. So what this is giving you is you have to have the ability to access that land that you're potentially conveying to HRSD. So that is an access easement. And those are your three.
All right, well, at this time, do we have a motion for the access of an easement for 27-2177, 21-179A, 27-122A?
So moved.
A motion by Reggie. Do we have a
Second.
Motion by Reggie, probably second by John. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield, Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. You finished with us, Heather?
I am. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we'll have a budget supplement request, Betty Muncy, page 113.
Okay. Very simple. There was not enough money in the Board of Zoning Appeals budget for training. They had enough to send maybe one of their people off for training. So this is to apply additional funding to cover two other people that need to have training.
All right, do we have a motion to approve budget supplement request FY 2022-8?
So moved.
A motion by Lud, do we have a second? Second. Motion by Lud, probably second by Pete Mansfield. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield, Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
and Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. Next, we have Betty, citizen appointment.
Yep.
Betty Muncy.
Okay. In your packet, let's start with the, let's see, the Wetlands Board alternate member. There's an application that's been received from Mary Culbertson to fill the alternate member position until the end of until September 30th, 2024. For me to go through all of them.
We can.
And then you can come back and do whatever. Let me just explain them all.
Okay, yeah, you can explain them all.
Okay, the EDA, there are 4 applications that have been received to fill the rest of Mr. Feegum's term that expires January 31st of 2022. There's an application received from Andrea Robinson for the Social Services Board for a 4-year term. And there are 3 applications actually that have been received for positions on the Board of Zoning Appeals. You have 2 in your packet, one from Ray Kostesky and the other from Mary Lou Stevenson. And then we've also received one from Priscilla Bonnie Davenport. And just a note on that, for the Board of Equalization, there are some requirements that the state has for those positions. 30%, the most that you can have is 5 regular members. If at the request of the board, the circuit court could appoint 2 alternate members. 30% of the members of the board shall be commercial or residential real estate appraisers or other real estate professionals, builders, developers, or legal or financial professionals. And at least 1 member shall sit in on all cases involving commercial, industrial, multifamily, residential property unless waived by the taxpayer. So,
All right. So at this time, let's have a motion to approve the wetland board person. Do we have a motion for Murray Culberson?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Reggie, second by John. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield, Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Jesse. excuse
Aye.
me.
Motion shall carry. All right, next, let's have a motion for EDA member.
Hallie Holmes.
All right, we have a motion for Hallie. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion, but probably second by John. Any more discussion?
I'm not sure that it's unusual to have 4 candidates for a position on something as important as the EDA. And I don't know that we have had a chance to talk with the EDA as to what their needs are. And so I would suggest that we would do well to postpone voting on this until we get a better feel for what the EDA needs.
Don't you represent on that board? EDA, you're not? Who's representative on EDA? Nobody, no board member here? Okay.
I've been missing a lot of meetings if it's me.
Oh. Well, we had a motion, but then probably the second, and now we have discussion. If they wanna, if you wanna rescind it, or we wanna keep on with the motion.
I think Lud makes a good point. We often have these come to us with one person applying for any one of these important positions. When we have multiple, it certainly merits at least a discussion with the EDA. But I also, want to recognize that this is not a slight against one particular candidate. It's just, we don't often have this many people applying for a position. So I think if it would be okay, I would be for tabling this and maybe assigning Lud with communicating with the EDA and bringing that back to us.
I'm just looking at it. I know we a lot of times, we appoint people on the EDA. So I think, my personal opinion, I know some of these people on here and I think, just for conversation's sake, we need good people on the board. And I'm not saying we're gonna have to vent somebody that's experts on everything, but I think we need a little more diversity on the board. And we got the opportunity now to have some of it, and now you want to hold it up. I just Wayne Jesse. And I think it's gonna be good to have a lot of different people on the board. And right now, I think Hallie Jean Holmes is the best qualified person to be that person at that time, by me being here a while. And she's right out here now. You see anybody else out here that's on that board here? Look out there. Do you see any of these out here decided they're gonna come here and she's out here now and we're gonna table it? I don't agree with it. So we had a motion, it's been put on the board, okay? And we had the discussion. Now, if Reggie want to rescind his motion, then we'll do it. If we don't, we're gonna put the motion on the floor and we'll leave it like it is. All right,
That's fine.
Okay.
And I'm just, further comment, I called the EDA because I said, what do you need? And
well, they can still
they said-
find what they need. I
and-
can tell you, they still can find what they need, because I'm not very, I don't have good conversation with the EDA right now anyway, but because, they don't really, well, I'm gonna leave it alone. You go
Let
ahead
me-
and say
let
what
me
you have to
finish, let me
say,
finish.
and I'll let you finish, because
Okay.
I'm through with it.
So what I heard was we have looked at the qualifications of the candidates and they look like they're all qualified. I haven't, and Gordon had asked people for input, hadn't gotten any input. So what we decide is fine.
Okay.
I mean, it's not an issue. I think it's just unusual for us to have 4 candidates for a position. And I
think it's good. I
We're
think it's
just
good.
cautioning us not to
Right.
rush in. We want to make sure that we fill the position right.
Right, well, I mean, it's good, but like I'm just saying, we leave it like that, okay? And we just vote on it.
That's fine.
All right, motion has been put on the floor.
Mr.
And
Chair,
second.
just a quick question on the discussion. How many positions are on the EDA, Eddie, do you know?
I got the list right here. We
There's
have
7.
It's 7?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a vacant, which is 7.
Right.
And I
okay.
got the list right here. You wanna
No, that's
see?
fine.
Here's the list right here.
All set.
All right, we have a motion, it's been probably second, and then discussion is over with. Let's vote on that motion. Roll call.
Mr. Coons? Mhm.
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield? Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion to carry. All right, let's go on to the next. Airport final
No, Social Services Board?
Social Service Board. Oh, yeah, I got one more on here. Gotta get there. Social Service Board, we have Andrea Robinson. Do we have a motion for Social Service Board?
Move that we approve Andrea Robinson's application for the Social Services Board.
We have a motion by John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by John, probably second by Reggie. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Mansfield? Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried. All right, now we have the Board of Equalization. What do we, Ray Koski?
Yes, I'd like to move not only that we approve Ray's reapplication, but acknowledge that Board of Equalization spot is difficult to fill, and he's been on it for quite some time. And as a leader, he taught me everything I learned about Board of Equalization. Not enough to stay on that board and not get on this board, but
Right.
I do appreciate Ray and what he's done there.
All right, so you have that motion? Got a motion by John. Do we have a second?
And do we also need to do Mary
We can
Lou
do Mary Lou
Stevenson at the
Stevenson.
same
She's in my
time?
district too.
Yeah,
Do those
let's do them both together for the Board of Equalization.
All right, we have a motion.
How about Priscilla Davenport?
And Priscilla Davenport, yes. So she's on it too.
Yes.
So my motion would be for all 3 then.
All right, we have a motion for all 3. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by John, we'll probably second by Reggie. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Kimbrough?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Coons?
Aye.
See, Mr. Mansfield? Mr. Jesse?
Aye, motion so carried.
So do we now have
You have
all
three.
the
You have three
members
of
we
five.
need
You
for?
have 3 of 5.
I thought it was a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5.
There's somebody from every district.
Yeah, when I was on it, it was 5. and I-
There should be somebody from every district. There should be somebody from every district. That's how it used to be.
It says, every board shall be composed of not less than 3 nor more than 5,
Okay.
or the number of local election districts in the locality,
Yeah, so we have
whichever
everything.
is greater.
Gotcha.
So you have to do 5.
5. All right.
I'm still working on
And I'll try to beat Lud.
All right. Okay, next is airport, final airport layout plan. Betty Muncy, I got you again.
No, my goodness.
Do we need you?
No,
I thought he already did. Yeah, he already did.
Okay. For action today is authorization for the chair or the county administrator to sign the revised airport layout plan. This plan has received conditional approval from the Department of Aviation, and a copy of that letter was in your packet. Just as a reminder that this is still just a plan that can be amended at any time, but it shows the proposed runway improvement on the plan, which is the first step necessary for any actual improvements to be considered by the state. So,
Betty, I'm sorry, you're asking for us to approve the layout plan?
yes, and to authorize the chairman to sign the documents.
So moved.
Do we have that motion or by John? Do we have second? Motion by John, probably second by Pete Mansfield. Any more discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield, Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye. Motion so carried. Now we have that lease agreement that they normally do.
Okay. Yes.
Lawson.
Yep. Wings and Wheels is still planned on happening the end of September. And as part of that, the board traditionally approves a lease agreement with the Lawsons that their property is used for parking on that for a fee of $500.
Do we have a motion to approve the Lawson land agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Reggie, probably second by John. Any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield. Mr. Kimbrough.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
And Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. Section would be next, line item 6, administration update, animal shelter improvement. Anne Marie.
Thank you. Good evening. The 2021-22 budget included funds to add a roof and drainage to the outdoor kennels at the Middlesex County Animal Shelter. I requested quotes from local bidders, local contractors, and I also used the state EVA, which is an electronic bidding type site. Received 4 bids, received several no bids. River Woodworks provided the lowest quote, and I'm going to recommend that we do a purchase order with them on the project. The price of the project is going to be $28,666 plus a 15% an owner-controlled contingency for a total not to exceed $32,996.68. I ask for your approval to do this purchase order.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the low bid?
So-
We gonna have discussion. We can discuss it. You can start the motion. All right.
I'll move. So move.
All right, we have a motion by Lud. Do we have a second? Second by John.
There's 3 other people.
Nobody else saying nothing.
I'll second.
All right, motion by John,
Just-
probably second by
Just to
Reggie.
be clear, River Woodworks
Oh, there you go.
is a great company, and we're in good hands, but they're personal friends of mine, so
Right.
I'm going to abstain.
Right, I understand. I know those guys. They do great work. All right, motion been probably second. Now we have discussion. Pete Mansfield. Here you go. Let's put your mic on, Pete.
Yeah, sure. What is the 15% contingency? Is this,
I added that. Their bid was flat at $28,666, but they bid this over 2.5 months ago. And I'm concerned that there may be something that I missed in the bidding that we developed the specs probably 18 months ago, that I may have missed something. So that's right. But the bids were, the highest bid was $58,680. And of course, River Woodworks was the lowest at $28,666. So we just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything when I did the request for quotes.
And that keeps you from coming back to us if there's a minor overage. And, I would also just point out that I don't know who the other bidders were, but this is using a local contractor from the Venerable Hartfield
Right.
District.
We generally do allow up to 25% to be flexible within the bid. I think that is written in our purchasing procurement policy that we're allowed up to 25%. I'm just adding it in as an owner controlled, so we all know what I'm doing. And as you know, we're just adding it's going to be a there's outdoor kennels, and we're just adding a cover to that and drainage for that cover.
It's my understanding that some part of this is mandatory. Is that right? Am I remembering correctly?
I don't know that. I'm sorry. I just came in at the tail end of this
I
project.
think we have to have covers over the kennels.
Okay.
And that's why I was quick to make the motion, because a part of it is mandatory.
All right, we have a motion been probably second. And it's any more discussion? If not, roll call.
Let's see, we are on to Mr. Mansfield, Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Coons,
Abstain.
and Mr. Jesse.
Aye, motion so carried. Now we got the, next would be the CCOC update on the gym floor, change order.
Thank you. Good evening. We had our, at August 30th, we did have a update with the people with Trinity and the engineers regarding the CCOC project that you all approved, that the board approved. We are working on the change order number 2, the gym floor repair/replacement. The expected cost of that change order was $35,560. And what we're doing is, obviously, we're replacing that gym floor. We're adding pickleball, volleyball, and basketball court. So when you go in there, those are the little lines that you'll see in there. You did approve that. You approved that as a change order previously. And we've also discussed change order number 3. It was suggested at the August 30th meeting that we wanted to put fencing up around the large HVAC system, you know, that big column of HVAC, to simply protect it from vandalism and or other things that happen in the community, I guess. We have not gotten a quote on that, but that I may be coming back to you for a third change order on that. We're still on target for a completion by the end of December this year. So we just continue to proceed as expected with this CCOC improvements project.
All right, thank you for the update. Next, we have County Attorney.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a couple items, if I may.
I can't, hey, Matt, I can't see you, so I don't want to hear from you. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I'm looking at my big forehead right over your head.
All right, what's up, Matt?
No, just
Okay.
a couple things. Lud, did you want me to cover the infrastructure bill, or were you going to do that under your board comment? The regional coalition we talked about?
I was going to do that in my comments, but this is a good time for it, I think, in your comments. And would you like me to make an introduction?
Either way, I can do it. I've got a couple of quick updates on it, but if you'd like to.
Yeah, we had a conversation with Keith, our delegate, about obtaining funds for failing septic systems, and improving the Chesapeake Bay to try and get state funds to help us with our sewer challenges. And this came after we saw that there was significant funding that had been made available for similar purposes by the state of Virginia. So we asked Keith Hodges, how can we get better state support for the sewer projects that we're undertaking? He recommended that we find other counties in similar situations. There are a lot of counties that are on waterfront that have failing septic systems on waterfront that do not have central sewer systems. And he recommended that to the extent that we could form a coalition with other counties and appeal to the next session of legislature that will begin taking place in January as a group, that we're much more likely to be able to get some earmarked state funds. And he said, everything that's been funded at this point has already been earmarked, so you can't get any of that. But in the next session, we may be able to. And so he said, if you could ally yourself with other counties in similar situations, that would be the most powerful way to go ahead. So what we would like to do is ask Matt to contact other counties in similar situations and see if we can form essentially a coalition of requests to compile a more significant ask of the legislature when they're next in session. And so we'd need Matt to carve out some time to do that. So that's my introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Lud. That's a very good one. And it's timely because we're 2 months away from the Virginia Association of Counties Conference in Norfolk. I'm very familiar with several communities on the Eastern Shore that are engaged with HRSD and similar projects to that of Middlesex's, and also Southside communities. This infrastructure bill that's making its way through Congress now has a lot of promise as well. So it's really a two-pronged approach, one with the state and one with the feds. But if we can develop a coalition of the willing, so to speak, that have similar infrastructure needs, we speak better with a more combined voice. I've taken the liberties of putting out some fillers. It's my understanding the town of Wachapreague and several other communities over on the Eastern Shore are very interested in trying to develop a little bit more of a robust lobbying effort with the state and this upcoming infrastructure bill. We have a tentative meeting scheduled with Rob Whitman on September 9th to discuss the federal funds in the infrastructure bill. In fact, Lud and I and Greg Chambers attended President Biden's town hall meeting on the infrastructure bill, where he was, I guess, trying to drum up a little bit more support, grassroots support for it. It's mine. I've also had a preliminary conversation with HRSD staff. It's my understanding Ted Hennepin is going to be meeting in the next several days with the Secretary of Natural Resources to talk about how our burgeoning coalition of the willing and local localities and towns and counties in our area could partner with HRSD and help bring some of those state and federal funds here to our region. And with the board's authorization, I'll try to spearhead, get this group started, similar to what Jack and I did with the Stormwater Coalition several years ago. I'll reach out to Dean Lynch and try to set up a little mini meeting at the VACO conference of the willing communities. And it happens that Norfolk is right in the middle of all of us, so it may be beneficial to try to get some action from the board, or at least authorization for me to do that, so we can get them in a room and chat this thing out. And that's the short and skinny of it. The infrastructure fund or infrastructure bill making its way through Congress is it's a lot of money, and I think those who get there first with the loudest voice are going to get their share of it. So if it's okay with the board, it's something I would like to try to pursue to get a coalition of the willing developed.
I think that's a good idea, Matt. Do you have consensus with the board? Yep.
Okay,
Good.
two other quick items.
Go.
Not to be outdone by broadband. We have been busy too at the Water Authority. You may have noticed that the tank at Rosegill has grown and is now complete. We hope to be pumping water and hopefully serving customers in November, early December at the latest, for phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. We have to test the lines. We have to get the remaining balances on this on the connection fees paid. We have to get the meter set, but we're moving right along, and we're optimistic that we're going to be able to make that. Hopefully I'm sharing the right screen.
Yeah, we see the tank.
Very good. Okay, and the next thing is the RCC president, Shannon Kennedy, Dr. Shannon Kennedy, reached out to me recently and asked me to take over the chairmanship of the Budget and Finance Committee at RCC. I'm the county's delegate on the RCC board. It shouldn't require a large time commitment on my part, pretty much no more than I'm already exercising, serving on their board. And if it's okay with the board, I'd like to accept that. And the last update I have is census data. We expect to have the Tiger census block data on population on September 16th. And we lost approximately 300 people out of the county, one form or the other. And it may or may not affect our redistricting. I had a preliminary conversation with Melissa Welsh, that she's following up with the state to get a little bit more guidance on some of the rules changes. But we'll have more to report on that in October. If we do have to, we may very well not have to change any of the election boundaries based on population changes. If that's the case, it's going to be a fairly easy thing. We just keep the same election boundaries. If we do have to change them, it appears that it will be very, very minor changes. And again, more to report in October. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. Heather, you have anything for us?
No, sir, I do not at this time.
Thank you.
That was my
All right, do we have
I was
any?
trying to go quick. I was trying to go
We
quick.
have any unfinished business? No, do you have any new business?
If you could pull up a couple slides for me, I'll try to go quickly. And while he's pulling those up, I noticed the water tower is Charger Blue. Maybe we get with the art program and maybe something home of the Chargers, something like that.
Yeah, it's Charger Blue because it's largely maintenance free. And I've been fighting everybody trying to paint something on that tank for about a year now. We kind of like it being maintenance free, but we can fly a flag from the top of it if you'd like.
We're selling sponsorship rights.
I hear you. I hear you. So in all seriousness, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And as you may recall, this April, I believe, we had a speaker down here for a roundtable discussion. And I've been working with a group of concerned citizens, various members of departments, from the sheriff's office to social services, industry experts in mental health and healthcare. And we've called ourselves, We Are Not Alone. The idea is when you're approaching someone who may have suicidal ideations, telling them that they are not alone, it just doesn't sound right when you think about it. What you're trying to do is identify with them and say that I have problems too, I struggle too, maybe not to the same extent, but and maybe not right now, but we are not alone if we choose not to be alone. The point in me bringing this up on Suicide Prevention Awareness Month is we've put together a program at no cost to the county at this point, where we're going to have Dr. Kent Corso come down January 26th of next year. We will be approaching 2 years in COVID lockdown at that point. Mental health, while your social service cases every month look like they're down, social services will assure you top to bottom that the issues are not down. In fact, they're up. And so what we are finding is a lot of demand from numerous departments that find themselves shoulder to shoulder in new ways that they may not have been historically, or that they haven't challenged themselves to work more closely together. And they all are demanding more training, regional. And so what we're doing is we're getting this training together. We're going to pay for the speaker out of an existing budget within the Department of Social Services. But I'm giving you a heads up that if we end up exhausting the social services training fund, it may be something in budget season that we need to seriously consider for subsequent years. If we can reduce suicide, if we can reduce mental health issues, if we can elevate citizens and members of all of these departments to a place where they feel more trained and more prepared to confront these things that they see on the very front lines as first responders and second responders, there will be a benefit to the county beyond saved lives. Whether it's suicide or incarceration, the outcomes of our current lack of funding and awareness to mental health issues, it's epidemic across the country. But to the extent that it's in our community, I see this again as an opportunity for us to lead regionally and invite law enforcement and social service experts from around the region to participate in our training, get the credits that they need for ongoing accreditations within their line of work, whether it's law enforcement or social services, clinicians. But this ongoing dialogue must be just that, an ongoing dialogue. And I would encourage, it will be free to the public. It will be January 26th at St. Clair Walker. And it is my hope that this is a continuation for us of something much broader where we can put ourselves on the map as taking mental health and suicide more seriously and letting others know that we're actually a resource and we're leading on doing more than what is currently average, which isn't hard to do. And when it's not hard to lead, all the more reason. So I won't go through all of the slide, but this is some of the, we're still putting this together on a shoestring budget of $0 with volunteers from various departments from throughout the community, from down as far as Hampton Roads, as far as Oregon. There are rural populations throughout the country that know this is going on in their backyards, and they're trying to do things, and we're trying to learn from them and aggregate all of that into something helpful for our region. So I just wanted to make everyone aware and appreciate your support, not asking for anything at this point, but just putting in a little marker for budget season. When we look at social services, their budget for training, this may be a line item that unfortunately needs to expand.
Thank you, John. All right. Next matter presented to the board, I'm gonna start to my left. Lud, you got anything?
Yeah, I attended the VACO conference.
Mike, no.
I attended the annual VACO conference that I mentioned a little while ago, and I participate on the Economic Development and Planning Committee of that organization, and we got an update on with a couple of modifications of the priorities that they will have this year for the legislature. The first priority, as you would expect, is broadband. And then they have a number of positions that they put forth on economic development in particular. And what they've added this year is VACO supporting the provision of state funding for the mission of regional economic development organizations to foster regional cooperation in expanding business and job opportunities. This is something new to me. And Ms. Holmes, I'm glad you're here because you could take this to the EDA it's a new concept that VACO is behind. And perhaps, again, we can combine forces with other counties and get more support for our economic development, which we do in part already with the river region. But there may be more state support for that type of thing. So that's all I have.
All right, Pete? John?
Just a quick thank you to Reggie, who helped both he and I identify the line between the Topping and Hartfield districts. He was called upon by a constituent of ours, a Middlesex citizen, and Reggie took it upon himself to set up a meeting, invite me and Greg Chambers of the Water Authority. They had questions about water and sewer, and they were good questions, and it was a great dialogue between 20 or so constituents, the Water Authority and two of their supervisors. And nothing gives me more pleasure than when constituents are surprised at how responsive their local government is, even if we don't necessarily think of a line between Topping and Hartfield as all that important. So thank you, Reggie.
Reggie?
And I enjoy doing things like that because it gives me a chance to get out in the community and meet people that I actually don't know. And I've done right much of that, in this last month. I also, went to Richmond, with the governor and the senator, where it had the electric buses that John's idea came up and, represented the board. Took my two grandkids. There was only two kids up and everybody thought that was, and they were noticed. I mean, the governor said the two kids out front and all that because we were talking about school buses. And that we getting two electric school buses, this year. And I thought that was, a good experience. And, I feel things like that we reach out, you answer the phone, how much we disagree to agree. And one of the better things I had, a lady met me, we talked on a letter that came in the Sentinel. And we met at First Baptist here in Saluda. And we talked for a little while about things, things going on in the county and different things that are happening that all of us don't really understand. And we talked about an hour and a half, just about everything you want to talk about. And At the finish, we got finished with the conversation. We said, you know something? If it was a problem, we could solve it easy. I said, I know. I said, but they won't let us do it. And we laughed and gave a hug and walked away. I guess when we came there, both of us were there, our opinions was maybe a little different, but how important it is to reach out. If we can talk about something, we can solve a problem. And the second thing, I got to give hands out to the citizens of Local Seal in my district. They made calls, they got on Facebook, and after a year and a half, I talked to Brian. Brian called me. We had a good conversation because I've been knowing him all his life. I said, Brian, he said, I know, I got it off the internet. I said, good. I said, it's hard to come out from the post office. Residents can't see. He promised me and the residents that he was going to do something with these bushes that come out because literally you can't see. Accident have been caused. And Brian, so far I see the bushes are gone. And I got to get hoops out for Brian Major because it's good to be a person of your word. When you say you're going to do something, do it. And it's things like that are a blessing within itself. Just from reaching out, touching somebody, talking to somebody, and maybe you might want to talk to somebody that nobody else want to talk to. And you got a lot to learn from individuals like that.
Thank you. And I don't have anything. Do we have a motion to recess at this time?
So moved.
Motion by John. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Lud. Motion by John, probably second by Lud. Roll call.
Mr. Kimbrough,
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Mansfield.
Aye.
Mr. Jesse.
Aye. See you back at 7.